going live and we're live. Hello, there's Chaya already in the room saying shalom all. Shalom, Chaya. How's it going? Thanks for joining us. Just getting settled there. It's a very cold night tonight, but just getting organized. And I've finished my book. I didn't get through this chapter at all, in terms of I thought I'd have enough room for it. So I've had to start, interestingly enough, another one. So I wonder how many of these things we're going to end up with by the time we're finished with this Dune book club. So I hope you're keeping well, Chaya. Thanks for joining me, and anybody else out there who's popping in to check out this Dune book club. And tonight we're going to have a look at chapter 16, which is the banquet scene, of course. There's Babs saying evening. Doc, evening, Babs. How's it going? I hope you're keeping well. Thanks for joining me as always. I jokingly put up in the description, also available on LP as read by Frank Herbert. So the banquet sequence is the banquet scene is one of those parts of Dune that's been recorded, hasn't it, by Frank? And it is available. I'm sure it's available on other. I think it's on YouTube actually, so you can probably listen to him reading it. But back in the days of LPs, you could get Frank Herbert reading the banquet scene on LP. So there you go. Bojack saying, there's Bojack Harkness saying, hello, Bojack, how's it going? Brad Rose saying, good morning, you beautiful people. Morning, Brad, how's it going? Thanks very much, everyone, as I said, for joining me. This is a big chapter with an awful lot of detail in it, I have to say. And I've been working away all week. And I still don't have my Tiger video done, I'm afraid. Really, it's just that much work with the book club, to be honest. But you'll be very pleased to know that I've only got a few more minutes of that video to edit, and then so pretty much after this book club is done, I'll be piling in to finish the rest of the video, and we'll be getting it rendered. And I'll not say it'll hopefully be up by Friday evening, but there's a good chance it'll definitely be up by Saturday evening. So thanks for your patience with that, folks. But yeah, we'll have a half-hour-long video on Alfred Bester's Tiger, and I'm pleased to say hopefully it'll be a spoiler-free video while trying to sort of give you as much about the book as possible. There's a little bit of minor plot points in it, but otherwise, hopefully it won't ruin. It's the one thing I don't want to do is ruin anybody's enjoyment of this book if you haven't read it. So there we go. So thanks very much for joining us, folks. I hope the weather's not too bad wherever you are at. And here we go. I'll have to swap notebooks at some point with this one. I don't know how many notes I ended up with. Excuse me. In the end, and I'm trying not to go nuts or anything, but just trying to sort of anything to do with this just to help me follow it as we go through the talking. And looking at the book, but on this one we've got 137. And there's so much in the banquet scene. An awful lot. I hope you can hear me okay. Let me see. I'll just bring my microphone down a wee bit there. Tilt it a bit better. That's better. There we go. So chapter 16, the banquet scene. Shall we get going? Busy helping Brad move houses. Brad moving sucks. You're a good guy. Yes, indeed. I've moved house more times than I can remember. Okie dokie. So here's the epigraph. Let's just... I suppose this one's on greatness and the sardonic. Greatness is a transitory experience. It is never consistent. It depends in part upon the myth-making imagination of humankind. The person who experiences greatness must have a feeling for the myth he is in. He must reflect what is projected upon him, and he must have a strong sense of the sardonic. That is what uncouples him from belief in his own pretension. The sardonic is all that permits him to move within himself. Without this quality, even occasional greatness will destroy a man. From the collected sayings of Muad'Dib by the Princess Irulan. Excuse me. Get some fluids there. I've got a single solitary beer with me tonight. So this one's all about greatness and the sense of the sardonic. And I've made a wee note that it's all very male-centric, isn't it? All the terms are male within this epigraph. And a person who's caught up in the myth-making imagination of mankind. So this is one of the big themes of Dune that we're talking about here, and it works in a couple of different ways. But essentially, what Frank calls the periodic messianic convulsions that overcome mankind. Pardon me, and the myth making process is a big part of that. So here we go. People who experience this must have a feeling for the myth that they're in. They must be aware of it, I suppose. And for it to work, what we're being told here is it must reflect what is projected upon him. So in that sense, it's what the masses project upon the individual that helps build the myth. But within this, he must have a strong sense of the sardonic. Excuse me. So to be sardonic is to be grimly humorous, cynical, I'd argue. The word comes from, I think, the Greek word for the Sardinians, which is another one of those little interesting words. It's a bit like laconic, I suppose. So the idea is that if he has a sense of the sardonic, this will uncouple the individual from the belief in their own pretensions. So it'll allow them to separate themselves from the myth and the actual reality of their self, all that permits him to move within himself. The sardonic is all that permits him to move within himself. So the sardonic is only this quality is that which gives the hero, maybe in this sense, that sense of freedom to move as an individual within the myth-making process. Without this quality, we're told, even occasional greatness will destroy a man. So there we go. We're going to see, again, the epigraphs have a bit of meaning, really, don't they, in relation to this, or to all the chapters. But what we're going to see is this sense of sardonic, I suppose, really with Leto. And it's an all over the place chapter, this, to be honest with you. It's very well written. It's very tightly constructed. And we have a fair amount of movement within the setting. And we have an awful lot of, I suppose, new characters, new guests, new groups within the political sphere of Arrakis and the greater sphere of the Empire. And we get introduced to so many different things here. There's Cynthia saying hello all. Hi, Cynthia. Thanks for joining us. We're just getting started. So, yeah, there's a lot to go with. And we'll see this sense of the sardonic in Leto later. The other kind of thing that we'll get within this chapter is we'll kind of have a sort of flashback from Jessica to Jessica's school days, her Bene Gesserit school days, where we're going to get a lesson on espionage and in particular motivation, I think. And so we're going to see both the nature of the sardonic being played out with Leto, and I suppose Jessica and Paul using their abilities to observe the guests, if you like, and to point out motivation, if you like, and to focus on motivation in particular with all the espionage that's going around. So straight up, first off, we get our scene. We're back to the dining hall in the Arakeen Great House. We're told that there's dispenser lamps and it's early dark. Now, I have to assume, and I'm assuming that this is the evening of the second day. We've gone to darkness, I suppose, and it is hard to get a sense of where does the time carry on from this, especially after the previous, I suppose, action down at the airfield and so on. So we have the dispenser lamps, and we get a bit of scene setting and a bit of mood from Frank. The yellow glow casts upwards, and we get, of course, in the dining hall, not the Great Hall, the black bull's head with its bloody horns, and onto the this is the yellow glow reflecting upwards onto the black bull's head with its bloody horns and onto the darkly glistening oil painting of the old Duke. So we've already discussed this. What a lovely, might be a point of conversation over dinner, but not a particularly nice one. And I suppose the whole sense of why are these things here in the dining hall is quite interesting. To do with mood, I think, and theatre in particular from the Atreides. So beneath, and we're told that these are, and I like this word here, talismans. These are talismans of House Atreides. Beneath these talismans, we have white linens, the Atreides silver, all placed in precise arrangements along this great table. Frank loves his tables, doesn't he? Well, we're told there are little archipelagos of service beside crystal glasses, each setting squared off with a heavy wooden chair. There's a central chandelier that is unlighted, and we're told that the chain twists upwards into the shadows where there is the mechanism of a poison snooper concealed therein. So a fair amount of little details setting this up, and for a little bit of here's an entrance, pausing in the doorway to inspect the arrangements. The Duke thought about the poison snooper and what it signified in his society. So enter Leto Atreides, pausing in the doorway. We have him framed within all of this setting of the dining room, and the trappings and accoutrements and talismans, if you like, of House Atreides are all around him, and he's here to inspect it. And we get a little bit of his thoughts here on what having a poison snooper really means to your society, and it's a good thing to think about, I suppose. His thoughts suggest that it's all part of a pattern, and that you can plumb us by our language, precise, delicate delineations for ways to administer treacherous death. And of course, his thoughts are on death here at the beginning again, and it's a thing we have with Leto, this constant sort of obsession with death, death, doom, and destruction, etc. And of course, for those who are about to die, well, what is it? We said it, that's the wrong thing. I'm thinking of eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die. That kind of thing was where I meant to go there. Sorry. So we get a little bit about poison and society, patterns, and how you can plumb a people by our language. We're going to get this carried on later with the Bene Gesserit lesson. And in particular, there's something that Kine says that gives him away in terms of, I suppose, his superstitious beliefs. So we get a little chat about chowmerky, poison in the drink, chowmas, poison in the food. Excuse me. Now, where are we? I just lost my wee point there. And he shook his head, Yeah, so it's the fact is, very quickly then, sorry, I left a word out there, and I thought, but he just shook, he shook his head. Dear, oh dear, if we have a wee quick look at, we've got a couple of these words here, we'll find them in the terminology of the Imperium, chowmerky and chowmas. Where are we? Chowmas and almus in some dialects, poison in solid food as distinguished from poison administered in some other way, and chowmerky, also known as musky or murky in some dialects, poison administered in a drink. The name's quite suggestive there, murky and musk. Pardon me for chowmerky. It's a bit murky. Right, so we get a bit more, as I said, if we tend to jump back to the terminology of the Imperium when we find wee words like that, it is useful to us, and often they give us a little bit of more detail that flesh things out a bit. So we get a little bit more of a setting from him. Let's see, more settings. We get a bit of a comment on water, and each plate there's a flagon of water next to it. And we have these little bit about water comparisons previously. In this sense, here is enough water here to keep one reasonably poor Arrakeen family for one entire year. And of course, within setting this extra scene up, we have flanking the doorway in which he stood were broad laving basins of ornate yellow and green tile. Broadly, yeah, let me just check something here. I was wondering, I think I have a few misprints in my my edition here. And I think I must see if I can find it here, but I have leaving baskets and laving baskets. And I think they're more meant to be leaving. I'm not too sure. Might maybe get somebody to check that out, but I think I've actually made a wee note somewhere whenever I did find one of the wee possible misprints within the book. So There are these broad leaving basins, ornate yellow and green tile, and each basin has its own rack of tiles, we're told. And this is all to do with a custom. And we have a little bit of a shift back in time in using the past tense, and we're told all about this custom or how it's been explained to Leto via Mapes. So here's the details. We're told that as the guests enter, they dip their hands unceremoniously into the basin. They'll slop several cups of water onto the floor, dry their hands on a towel, fling the towel onto the growing puddle at the door, and then after dinner, beggars are allowed to gather outside to get the water squeezings from the tiles. So Leto's thoughts on this, not too happy, of course, typical of a Harkonnen fief, and every degradation of the spirit. And this causes him to say this custom stops here with an exclamation mark, even though he's muttering. And it's a thing that makes him angry, isn't it? And again, a comment about the Harkonnens, the level of degradation that they're prepared to go to. And we have this little scene where he sees a serving woman come on over. And this is one of the women that Mapes has approved of, I think. She comes out of the shadows, again, like Mapes, leathery face, blue within blue eyes. And Leto's solution to this was basically to have the basins and tiles removed and place them at the front door. Excuse me. Now, this causes a bit of a reaction in this old serving woman, but Nobleborn gasping, and I think I get we've remembered about how Leto behaves towards the staff, if you like. Yeah, he's not happy. I know the custom. He barked at her. Barking is often a thing that's associated with him. And basically he explains this to this old woman, and he has a moment of realization, one of these moments of sudden insight. As he barks, says, do you understood to this old woman? And on her face is and it must be unexpected to him. He doesn't get this, does it? It's dismay and anger. And this prompts his sudden insight, which I think, as we'll point out, isn't that insightful. Possibly, he figures out that this old serving woman plans to sell the water squeezings from the tiles, and gets her a few coppers from the wretches that come to the door. And he's angry about this. All he can see. With sudden insight, Leto realized she must have planned to sell the water squeezings from the foot-trampled tiles, wringing a few coppers from the wretches who came to the door. Perhaps that also was a custom. His face clouded and he growled, "I'm posting a guard to see that my orders are carried out to the letter." So he basically summons a little old lady up to him, barks at her, sees that she's not happy, thinks that she's greedy, doesn't really question her place in the custom, I suppose, just to make sure that she doesn't get anything. I'm posting a guard to make sure that doesn't happen. He's quite mean to an old woman, isn't he? He whirls and strides back down the passage to the Great Hall. So moving between the dining hall and the Great Hall, and he has memories in his mind of the toothless mutterings of an old woman. And I've just put sort of in brackets the fates there, possibly. But I've made a wee note about the serving woman, and my comment is this: is she not also wretched? And is she not also in poverty if she's having to, as much as there are people paying for the water, this is how she makes an extra bit of cash? That's pretty degrading in itself, isn't it? Chaya is saying a laver is a wash basin. Thank you very much, Chaya. Excellent. Good, because I'm going to be repeating that word a couple of times. Let me just make a wee note of that in my book here. Where are we? The laving baskets. Baskets. Laving basins. Laving. Thank you very much. I have a misprint in my book. I've actually spotted a bunch lately. Thanks very much for that. Laving wash basin. Yeah. So I was going with leaving, thinking that they did it when they were leaving, this kind of thing. But no, leaving basins there. Yeah, I must check it. Yeah, I'm pretty sure I've made a wee note whenever I encountered it. I thought that it was I've encountered it's leaving in here as well, and I was wondering which one was correct. Thank you very much for that, Char. Mm. So yeah, as I said, I made a wee note there. I just thought, you know, he's basically just robbed this rich lord, regardless of what he thinks about it. He's just stolen a good chunk of her income from her and posted a guard to make sure that she can't get around it. And I just thought it's really mean of him and not that insightful. And his mind rolled in his memories rolled in his mind like toothless mutterings of old women. An interesting sort of analogy there. He has these wee memories: open water and waves, days of grass instead of sand, dazed summers whipped past him like sandstorm leaves. Uh, and I've made a wee note there that the simile from these similes from the narrator keep giving away a kind of Arakeen bent, I suppose. It's all gone, he says, in his mind. He's very fatalistic, and I'm getting old. Um, I felt the cold hand of mortality, and in what? An old woman's greed. Well, there we go. So this old woman trying to make a few coppers, that's made him feel all doom and gloom. And he sees her as being greedy. And he sees really nothing else. And I've just, yeah, I just said that I think he's a bit of a twat here. He's taken a part of this old woman's livelihood. Mapes has said that she's okay. And it's maybe part of their custom, as I said. There's just not necessarily a nice thing. Um, and I've just my other wee note that I've made here. I don't know what you think, guys. As that I've just put that this is possibly done out of necessity, but he sees greed instead of desperation, and therefore I think it's another situation that Leto has misjudged. So we arrive at the Great Hall, and we get a bit of. We've started with Leto in this chapter. We're continuing to get his point of view. Excuse me. We kind of have Lady Jessica center stage. She's the center of a mixed group in front of the fireplace. And I've just put that everything seems more congenial in here, possibly because of the lack of the bull's head and all of that kind of thing. So we get a different sense of color to the room. It's more orange. There's a fireplace in here rather than the yellow light from the dispenser lamps. We're told that the orange blaze crackled and cast flickers of orange light onto jewels, laces, costly fabrics, etc., etc. So we get a bit of glitz and a bit of dazzle, sense of warmth and security, perhaps, getting ready for the feast, which doesn't like we don't get around to the food for quite a bit actually, and we get a run through of a number of the guests that are here. Let's see, and these are mostly off-world guests, if you like. Well, I suppose the way to put it is that the bulk of them aren't native to Arrakis, though they may live and work there. And I suppose that the Fremen representation will be Kynes. So we have a still suit manufacturer from Carthag. We have an electronics equipment importer. We have a water shipper who we're told has a summer mansion, which is near his polar cap factory. We have a representative of the Guild Bank. We have a dealer for replacement parts for spice mining equipment. And we have a thin and hard-faced woman who apparently runs an escort service. And who's reputedly whose service for off-planet visitors reputedly operates as a cover for various smuggling, spying, and blackmail operations. So I've actually put down, is she a madam or a mentat? Possibly. She runs it's a cover, and whoever she is, that she runs smuggling operations, spying operations, blackmail operations. So essentially, what we've got is a bunch of people in the room. And in terms of their industries, I suppose we have manufacturers, importers, bankers, shippers, dealers, etc., etc. Of course, the sex industry is represented. But But essentially, what they represent within the sphere of influence of Arrakis: survival equipment, electronics, water, money, sex, smuggling, spying, spice mining equipment, parts, and blackmail. And this is I suppose, if you want, this is the kings of industry, kings and queens of industry of Arrakis. Cynthia is saying Leto has also taken power away from the old woman, since selling water is an exercise of power in this society. Absolutely, that's a very good point, Cynthia. We're going to get that statement later, aren't we? We get a fair amount of certain individuals that control water within this room, and I suppose that she'd be way, way, way down on the list in terms of water power. But water is power on Arrakis. Yeah, there's many strata to society, I suppose. But yeah, he does. It's quite a harmful thing that he does to her, isn't it? If we speculate upon it, and who's to say that she doesn't get some of her own water from the drippings, if you like, to suggest that she doesn't take her cut first. It might be her source of water that she's just lost as well. Excuse me. So, yeah, fatalistic Leto into the fireplace into the Great Hall, and we've seen a bunch of these guests, and we're going to have some quite good interactions with the majority of them. We are pointed out something here that most of the women in the hall seem cast from a specific type. So the female guests, notably, are decorative, precisely turned out, and an odd mingling of what we're told is untouchable sensuousness. So from Jessica, even if Leto checking out where Jessica is suggesting that even if she was not the hostess, she would dominate this group. We get a bit of description for Jessica. She wears no jewelry, wears warm colors, a long dress, which is a shade of open blaze. And she has an earth brown band in her bronzed hair. So all warm colors, oranges, reds, I imagine. Open blaze, I would imagine, is either a very warm yellow, orange, or red. And I think this is a really funny bit. From Leto. We talked about Leto's ego recently. Of course, we had the idea of the ego likenesses, didn't we, in the last chapter? These idea of these paintings, we could suggest that, yeah, he's a bit of a bullish man, isn't it? I think this is quite funny. He realized, Leto's wonderful and astute realization, that she had done this to taunt him subtly, a reproof against his recent pose of coldness. She was well aware that he liked her best in these shades, that he saw her as a rustling of warm colors. And she's done this because of me. That's it's that ego that, and maybe she is wearing this because it is his. This is a particular favorite shade. This kind of thing. But it might be, I don't know. I strongly don't believe it, to be honest with you. I actually think that she's gone with the right dress, that kind of thing. I don't think it's all about Leto. We continue with sort of setting up who's here in this place. We have a little bit about Duncan Idaho, who's been brought back from the Fremen. He's wearing and he seems to be what we're told is a bit like an outflanker. He doesn't seem too comfortable here. He's wearing a dress uniform, his flat face unreadable. He's been summoned back from the Fremen under orders from Hawat. And of course, we know that Hawat's orders, that under the pretext of guarding Jessica, he is actually to keep Jessica under surveillance at all times. So, as I said, Leto's looking around. He's checking out the room. He's directing our attention for us. He's doing all the looking for us, the reader. And next we get Paul in the corner, surrounded by a fawning group of the young Arakeen Riches, and aloof amongst them, 3 officers of the house troop. Leto takes particular note of a young woman. Oh, let me just see this. My handwriting is not looking brilliant here. Oh, yes, what a catch. The ducal heir makes, that's it. But Paul was treating all equally with an air of reserved nobility, whatever that happens to be. Yes, indeed. We'll see sort of sex come into play as a weapon here later on. And apparently, we'll find actually that in sense of how it may be used against Paul, that I think he's well trained against it, and that it's seen by the Atreides as a kind of rather obvious thing. And of course, another death thought from Leto: he'll wear the title well, when I'm gone, this kind of thing. And at this point, we've actually got to the stage in Dune where Leto is now pointing out his own death thoughts to us, I believe. I realized with a sudden chill that this was another death thought. So this idea is in his own mind as well as within the narration, if you like. I just think it's interesting that he's pointing this out to us now. And we get a switch in perspective, really. We move over to Paul now. And quite interesting, he sees his father and avoids his eyes. He's looking at the clustering of guests, jeweled hands clutching drinks, unobtrusive inspections, etc. He's noticing people with tiny remote cast poison snippers, which suggests, if we think about what Leto was saying, or Leto's thoughts from the start of the chapter about what do poison snippers say about our society, what does it say about our language, etc. But also here's the fact that despite having a big poison snipper, I suppose, and having the surety of being a guest in the ducal castle, that people still bring their own tiny little poison snippers just to check. And would you really, if you're living in a world or a universe where poison is so common, would you really leave that up the chance to someone else, I suppose? Of course, the chatting about Paul is repelled by these people. They wear cheap masks, locked on festering thoughts, voices gabbling to drown out the loud silence in every breast. Excuse me. So we find out he's in a bit of a mood here, I think. Babs is saying, just to catch up with comments here, I noticed that all of them seem not Dune natives. Those who use Arrakis's resources for cash. Yeah. The lone voice of the Fremen and environmental being kinds are native. That's right, yeah. You get the sense that some of them have been here for a while, but they're representing, I suppose, interests that are essentially off-world mostly. Butte the Water Seller, again, we get the sense that he's not Fremen. So he's not from around here, and Fremen will be the only sort of Liat Kynes will be the only representative of the Fremen. Yeah, it's absolutely about all the economic interests here, and I suppose we're going to get a bit of insight into that, and we'll even see that some of this stuff's going on in the real world at the minute. To be honest with you, and we see that Paul's in a bit of a sour mood, as he puts it, which is him being honest with himself, I suppose. And he wonders what Gurney would say. And of course, we all know what Gurney would say about mood, that it's a thing for cattle and love. Dear, oh dear. So he knows, and again, being sort of quite self-analytical, he knows his own mood source. He didn't want to be here. He didn't want to come to this banquet with his father's firm. And very interesting, the way it's put to Paul is that you have a place, a position to uphold. Now, I've put just next to that's in the Fauferluk system. Your father is a duke, therefore you will be a duke, this kind of thing. But Paul, too, has his place within the system. Tells him that you're old enough and that you're almost a man. So it's almost, I suppose, like a debutante kind of thing for debutante Paul in a way, I suppose. Not that it's that banquet as opposed to ball. But it's almost like this is, well, it is, I suppose, for all of the Atreides, but it could be that this is Paul's first sort of coming out as a man at a social function. And I suppose it's time to do it, really, Yeah, you're almost, So Paul observes Leto emerge, inspect the room, and go over to his mother, Jessica. And as Leto approaches Jessica's group, we encounter the water selling, asking over, is it true the Duke will bring in weather control? And so Leto answers that we've not gone that far in our thinking. And we meet, this is one of the first of our guests that we meet, I suppose. The man turned, he has let me see, a bland, round face that's darkly tanned. And this is, of course, Lingar Butte, who is the water seller, the water shipper. Sorry. The Duke, we missed you, etc. Here's my misprint here. Let me see. Page 139, footnote number 24. Let me just check. Let me see. Returned his attention to the water shipper, explained what he'd ordered for the laving basins. No, that one's okay. Was it a different one? Hang on. No, that's not the misprint then. Yeah, oh, hang on. Got to fix that. It's not laving basins at all, is it? It is laving basins. There we go. Laving basins. Leto basically says things needed doing and explains what he's done about the laving basins. And I've put this as a bit of, I suppose, virtue signaling. Is that what we call it these days? A little bit of propaganda. And it doesn't quite, I suppose, go the way he thinks with the water seller. He's saying this will cost amends now. And they're asking, I suppose, is this a ducal order, my lord? Man asked. Yeah, that's Butte. And at this point, Leto says, well, I leave that to your own conscience. So up to you, basically, if you want to continue the custom for now. But you can rest assured that he probably will change things permanently. And as he sort of says this, he turns and we get Liet Kynes coming up to the group. Let's see, where are we at in the book? Of course, we get a wee bit of gossip, etc., etc. One of the women, I think it's very generous giving water to someone shushes her. We get a proper sort of entrance for Kynes then. And again, this is the Duke observing him. He noted that the planetologist wore an old-style dark brown uniform with epaulets of the Imperial civil servant and has a tiny gold teardrop of rank at his collar. Another little water symbol, I suppose, with Kynes. And of course, the water shipper, I keep writing water seller down there, and that's wrong. He's a water shipper. Right, there we go. I suppose not too wrong. So he's quite angry and asks, does the Duke imply criticism of our customs? And again, I'm wondering, our customs is quite an interesting thing there. And who's he really talking about? Because it's clear, I think, that he's not representative of Fremen customs. And are these maybe customs of I suppose the towns and cities as opposed to the desert? Customs being changed, nods to Kynes, marks the frown on Jessica's face. So we get some thoughts. A frown, but again, Jessica's appearance, a frown does not become her, but it'll increase rumors of friction between us. And so we get the water. Duke's position. Duke. Oh, hang on. Sorry, I've lost the plot here a wee bit. With the Duke's permission, the water shipper says, "I'd like to inquire further about customs." So we have this. He doesn't really want to leave it here, and this is Butte kind of wanting to sort of assert his position socially, I suppose, within it. He's been quite. We're going to see this is going to be quite provocative. Leto. Here's the sudden oily tone of the man. Notes the watchful silence of the group that heads are turning. So this has grabbed people's attention. And we kind of get Jessica interrupting. Isn't it almost time for dinner? Can we not skip this kind of conversation? And of course Leto won't let it go. And it's one of these interesting sort of thing. But our guest has questions, and it's one of those kind of almost passive aggressive thing. Again, he takes in Butte, I suppose, his appearance. Where are we in my notes? I'm all over the place again. There we are. I should pay attention to the wee numbers I write down, shouldn't we? He's a round-faced man, large eyes, thick lips, and he recalls how it's memorandum. The water shipper is a man to watch. Lingar Butte, remember the name. The Harkonnens used him, but never fully controlled him, and that's pretty interesting about him. Of course, Butte continues himself saying that water customs are interesting. So the Harkonnens have done business with this guy. They haven't been able to hurt him. They've been able to work with him and use him, but they haven't been able to control him completely. That makes him interesting. Of course, Butte, water customs, smile on his face. He's happy about this. We've got a kind of almost a question that's almost set up to ambush here. I'm curious what you intend about the conservatory attached to this house. Do you intend to continue flaunting it in the people's faces? My lord. And it's, quite insulting. And he's absolutely poking at Leto. And Leto, with his ever-present anger is in check, stares at the man, as we always do. In this book, we get a lot of staring. And we get some of Leto's thoughts about Butte. First of all, brave. It takes bravery to challenge him in his own ducal castle. This guy's got some stones, hasn't he? And then we get another little bit of Leto's personality coming out, and it's another one of his little Machiavellian things, especially when we have Butte's signature over a personal contract of allegiance. In other words, it takes a lot of knowledge to behave like this to me, especially as I've got his signature. I could have him killed, just like the other people the signatures that I got. And yeah, it does make him think about this. Butte's actions have taken knowledge of personal power, and water is power here. As we were saying, if water facilities that Butte owns are mined, and he's ready to blow them up, destroy them at a signal, and he looks capable of it. Yeah, that's where the source of this man's power comes from. He notes that if you destroy the water facilities, you destroy Arrakis. And this is the club that Butte held over the Harkonnens. A very important statement here. And my big clunk right down here is that this is what we call hydraulic despotism, also known as Oriental despotism, and in the sense of the old use of the idea of controlling water. And it's a term that also applies now to things like controlling oil and gas, things that are essential for fuel and heating and stuff like that, So yes, indeed, hydraulic despotism, and this is the source of Butte's power. Jessica comes in as and it's really and the idea of he who can destroy a thing controls a thing comes from this, which is not the smartest of ideas, I suppose. So we have Jessica smoothing things over a bit here. We have plans. Smiles at Leto. Intend to keep it certainly, and we plan to hold it in trust for the people of Arrakis. I've put a little note in brackets, by the way. It's a great way of stealing stuff from people, is to hold it in trust for them without them knowing about it or anything like that. So there we go. So our dream is that someday the climate of Arrakis may be changed sufficiently to grow such plants in the open. And this is where we get the kind of the merging of the Atreides and the Fremen dream, if you like. And part of me wonders how much of that is actually propaganda at this point. Is it a genuine thing that they're about? And of course, we got this lovely little remark from Leto. Oh, bless her. Bless her, Leto thought. Let our water shipper chew on that. Eat shit and die, you scumbag. Basically, Jessica's just handed it to you. It's one of those moments where I think it's real. There's a real sense of Schadenfreude in Leto here, and that she's basically told Butte that Lingar Butte that one day, we intend to have this planet where green plants will grow everywhere. And that means that people like you will no longer be required. Lingard Butte, water sellers will not be needed. And I imagine I wouldn't. I imagine if Butte had any real sense about him, he'd realise that it's not something that's going to happen immediately anyway. Excuse me. Leto's thoughts, though. He's not happy about this guy, Butte. Howitt must redouble his efforts to infiltrate Butte's organisation. So, if we want a list of Leto's crimes that he's committed so far, we can add industrial espionage to the ever-growing list, I suppose. And we must start at once, I suppose. And here we get the thinking: must start at once on standing water facilities. Basically, standby water facilities. We've got to get our own emergency water supplies in place so that this man can't hold the threat of cutting off our water supply. No man is going to hold a club over my head, is Leto's thought here. And of course, really the sense of that is that Leto is the man who holds clubs over other people's heads. And nobody's going to do it to him. That's the way it is, I think, with him. But it's a little demonstration of power, I suppose, by Butte. And his smile is on his face. A commendable dream, my lord. And he withdrew a pace. He's kind of made his point, shown that he has power, and withdrawn. And that was kind of the whole point here. I think from Butte's point of view, notice me. Notice the level of power that I have and that we're going to do business together, and then I'm just going to stand back, but understand that I have power and understand where it comes from. And Leto does. So Butte, in terms of I suppose Butte's politicking, Butte's manipulations, interactions, whatever you want to call it here, for Butte at this point, it's a success, I think. He has been noticed in the right way. They're going to get rid of people like Butte one day, but not today. Not for a long time. And in the meantime, we'll do business. So I think it's a good interaction for Butte. And of the various characters at the table who are from off planet, I think certainly many of them take sides at a certain point within this chapter. Butte included, but I get the sense that Butte really just wants to be quite neutral. Leto's attention, however, at this point is drawn to the expression on Kynes' face. He's staring at Jessica. And as he puts it, he appears transfigured, like a man in love, or else caught in a religious trance. So Kynes has got the doe eyes, if you like, for Jessica. And we get a little switch in, I suppose, perspective here again. And we go over to Kynes' thoughts, don't we? We're told that his thoughts are overwhelmed at last by the words of prophecy, and they shall share your most precious dream. And he speaks directly to Jessica, do you bring the shortening of the way? So that's our Kwisatz Haderach, isn't it? The question's not answered, of course. Instead, we get an interruption by Butte and an exchange between him and Kynes. And it's quite a condescending little. Again, this is, I suppose, Butte. There are different little interactions going on. It's almost like Aristeia, I would say, though nobody ends up dead. But we get these little sort of competitions, people versus, Butte versus the banker, Kynes versus the banker, this kind of thing. I think it's quite fun. You come in tramping with your mobs of Fremen. How gracious of you. It's basically a bunch of bantered and very sort of loose threats, if you like, veiled threats. Kynes passed an unreadable glance across Butte. It is said in the desert that possession of water in great amount can inflict a man with fatal carelessness. And I said, not particularly veiled threats, if we think about it. If that's a veiled threat, it's not very veiled at all, is it? And of course, there are many strange sayings in the desert, but his voice betrays his uneasiness. And it deflects it a wee bit. Again, I think it shows you that Butte is actually quite brave. We get a bit of tension here. But But the interesting thing, I suppose, is that we understand that Bute's uneasy at Liet Kynes here, not Leto. And again, it's to do with the nature of power on Arrakis. Cynthia saying, in line with Babs's observation, would the dream of a green Arrakis mean much to Offworlders, or might she be instead directing this to Kynes? Kynes is certainly smitten with her comment. Yeah. I don't think it would mean much to Offworlders, Cynthia. Line with Babs's observation. Let me see. I noticed all of them seem not Dune natives, those who use Arrakis resources for cash. The lone voice of the environmental being kinds of native. Yeah. I don't know. I think it would be certainly a problem for Butte. But yeah, it probably is. I think there's questions that are being thrown out in the general air, if you like, but they're actually aimed at specific people. It's a thing within the chapter. Yeah, I'll have a wee think about that. I honestly don't think the dream of a green Arrakis would mean. Yeah, well, I suppose actually, hang on, we're forgetting about spice, but I suppose the idea is that we don't understand the relationship between the spice and what's going on with the spice on Arrakis at this point. But the dream of a green Arrakis will mean an awful lot to people who want spice. If it's a threat to the spice. Might she be instead directing this comment? Yeah, I think certainly at this point there is. Let me see. I think it's possible she smoothed things out in questions in regards to Butte, etc. previously, but we haven't really heard much from Liet at this point. So it could be it's kind of maybe possibly trying to draw him out into conversation. Smitten with her comment, absolutely. Kynes' thoughts overwhelmed at last by the words of the prophecy, and that this being a man who takes prophecy with a pinch of salt, that he sees it as a thing that points to sort of cultural indicators and this kind of thing, old-fashioned stories. And I suppose that's a bit of a red herring with Kynes. I think he's very superstitious and very religious, regardless of being a scientist. Have you brought as I said, yeah. We get a little bit of a diversion here from Jessica. Let me just see where we're at. His voice uneasiness to do with Liet and power. So Jessica crossed over to Leto, slipped her hand under his arm to gain a moment in which to calm herself. So this question from Kynes, which she hasn't answered, has had an impact on her. The Kwisatz Haderach, the shortening of the way, the planetologist's odd question, unnoticed by others. At this point, she sees that Kynes has bent over one of the consort women. What is she? She asks. Hang on. Or is that me that has asked that? Yeah, listening to a low voice coquetry. I've just put down what is she. Sorry, that's my cock. Oh dear. So she listens to low voice coquetry and Jessica's secret hope, we're told. Did the missionary protective? I put that one here too. The legend as well. Thoughts fan for her secret hope for Paul. He could be the Kwisatz Haderach. He could be. So there we go. Her secret hope for Paul, regardless of what we think or what we may have been told to think up until this point, that's a good indicator for us that Jessica really does desire for Paul to be the Kwisatz Haderach. And it looks like he could be. He could be. Not quite yet by the looks of it, but he's on his way. So, of course, the guild banker representative, who's a Harkonnen agent, he jumps in here and engages in conversation with Butte. Many people have sought to change Arrakis. Nothing new. And the Duke saw how the words seemed to pierce Kynes, jerking the planetologist upright and away from the flirting woman. Excuse me. So, not in relation to what you were saying there, Cynthia and Babs, I've just put here not subtle. Conversations are loud, obvious, and leading, and not subtle at all. The words seemed to pierce Kenji, jerking the planetarium into the sudden silence. We get a house trooper in the uniform of a footman, and he announces, "Dinner is served, my lord." So we have an awful lot of troops, soldiers dressed as waiters and waitresses and footmen, etc., in this place. And we get a procession, I suppose. And not that Leto knows this, I suppose, but the Duke directed a questioning glance down at Jessica. The custom here is for the host and the hostess to follow their guests to the table. Shall we change that one too, my lord? So a little bit of brevity there. And of course, he smells, seems like a good one for now. We'll let it stand. So this is also kind of going to allow us, Jessica and Leto, to kind of watch all their guests go by and give us a bit of an observation of them. The illusion, I suspect her of treachery, must be maintained, is Leto thinking. And as the guests are going by, of course, we have this suspicion from him. Who among you believes this lie? Which of the guests are, and so this once again, Leto's plan of pretending that he doesn't trust Jessica, really to see who he can catch amongst this group. I actually think at this point seems kind of pointless. I think they all, in that sense of what the point of the plan, they all advertise themselves quite well, I think. So Jessica's corresponding thoughts, she senses his remoteness, wonders at it. And we're told, as she has done so frequently over this last week. And I'll put a wee note about time, so I'm not too sure have we had a week passing, possibly, since we've arrived on Arrakis. Or I'm not too sure if this is I don't think it would be the second night. It's too quick, I think. Leto acts like a man struggling with himself. And she asks the question, is it because I moved so swiftly? Setting up this dinner party. So the dinner party is Jessica's idea. And she's done it quickly. And it's a good idea, I suppose, in terms of, we'll see how it plays out, actually, but I've made a wee note to see how it next page in relation to that word swiftly. Yet he knows the importance of mixing our people with the locals on a social plane. We're told that the way they look at themselves, I suppose, that we are father and mother surrogate to them all. Nothing impresses that fact more firmly than this sort of social sharing. So sitting down and having a meal. And Leto's thoughts on this dinner party as he watches the guests file past. He recalls Thufir's words regarding this affair. An interesting use of the word. And it's, "Sire, I forbid it." And this is where we were talking a wee bit earlier about, in the epigraph, the sense of the sardonic. Where are we? He must have a strong sense of the sardonic. It uncouples him from belief in his own pretensions, all it permits him to move within himself. Without this quality, even occasional greatness will destroy a man. Well, this is Leto's sardonic moment, I suppose. A grim smile touched the Duke's mouth. What a scene. Let me just see, I've written down camp here. Let me just check that. Recalled what Thufir Hawat had said when informed of the affair. "Sire, I forbid it." A grim smile touched the Duke's mouth. What a scene that had been. And when the Duke had remained adamant about attending the dinner, Hawat had shaken his head. "I've bad feelings about this, my lord," he said. "Things move too swiftly on Arrakis. That's not like the Harkonnens, not like them at all." So that grim smile touching the Duke's mouth, having this old man telling him, "I forbid you to have a dinner party." No, and just listening to him go on and on, and That's a little bit camp, actually, I put down in that sense that that Frank talked about, and he remains adamant about attending, and that kind of just it's just this little bit of grim humor. Through for how it's fears here. I have to say, I have a bad feeling about this. Not great. Again, that they're moving too swiftly. Not like the Harkonnens, not like them at all. So Paul passes by again, people moving along. And well, I'll put a wee question here, folks, by the way. If things are moving too swiftly on Arrakis, if it's not like the Harkonnens to move that quickly, if it's not like them at all, who is it like? Who is it likely to? Who is it like? I suppose. So I've just put in wee brackets there. The Emperor's doing the speed at which things are moving. So Paul passes Leto. He's escorting a young woman who's half a head taller than him. He passes a sour glance at his father, again, probably because he doesn't want to be there, and seems to be nodding at what the woman is saying. So we have a bit of politics here, and essentially what we're going to see is Jessica, from my point of view, this is the Atreides at work. Let me just see. Where are we? 49. So the young woman, something that her father, apparently, we're told of the young woman, her father manufactures still suits, and that only a fool would wear one of his still suits if they wanted to survive in the desert. So, in terms of other people moving by, we have another guest who's Jessica's late invite, we're told. Who's the man with the scarred face ahead of Paul? Leto asks. A late addition, we're told. Gurney has arranged the invitation at Jessica's request, and he's been cleared by Howat, although Howat's been a little stiff about it. And this is the smuggler, Esmer Turek, who we're told is a power amongst his kind, and that everybody here knows him. And also that he's dined at everybody's houses here. And of course, Leto asks a kind of almost stupid question, really. Why is he here? Everyone's going to ask, you know. And the response is that he sows doubt and suspicion simply by his presence here. The fact that we have him round for dinner is going to make everybody else wonder what's going on there. Are the Atreides working with the smugglers, etc., etc.? This is going to have really important payoff at the end of this chapter. And in the sense, if we actually remember that whenever we see Leto in terms of what happens at this point, I'm going to point out in a wee minute, all of this is Jessica's work. So Turek will also serve notice. This is the important bit, really. Turek will also serve notice to all the others that Leto is prepared to back up his orders against draft by enforcement from the smugglers' end as well. So this was the idea that Leto will be able to cut down on all the money spent on security, etc. If the Atreides enforce one thing, I suppose the security aspect of it at one end, if it's agreed that the smugglers do it at another, that cuts down the need for extra security and extra work when it's not required, which means more profits for everybody. And that it'll be a two-way street. So in terms of anybody trying to get things by the Atreides on one side, that the smugglers will be working in tandem with them. And this is the part of the plan, of course, that we're told that Howat liked. But my wee note here is that all of this is Jessica's work in terms of what she does for House Atreides. And Leto's response here is, I'm not sure I like it. And of course, and of course, I think he'll like it an awful lot later on. But why is there no Fremen? And we're pointed out that, there's Fremen here. Liet Kynes is here. Any more surprises from Leto? And all else is mostly conventional, though. I think this is a rather sort of a good response from Jessica. So the backup plan here, and this I think is quite interesting. And it's almost tragic, I think, at this point. Jessica's thoughts here. Can't you see, and that's it, that he's blind. Can't you see that this guy has fast ships, that he can be bribed, that he must have a way out of here, and that it's a door of escape if all else fails? This guy's our way out. What's he doing here, you idiot? What do you think he's doing here? That's the kind of and she thought, my darling, can't you see? And the answer is no. Um, really, or else he's not prepared to. I don't know, but it just seems quite sad. I think with Jessica, this is going to be backed up, I suppose, when we have a moment from Leto where he kind of understands his own limitations and failings, that he's missed something. And look, in this situation, Jessica won't have missed it. Paul won't have missed it. Most of the people in the room won't have missed it, and we as readers won't have missed it. But Leto will have missed it. Jessica, let me see. Yeah, Chaya says Jessica thinks they're viewed as surrogate parents. Paul's comment to Mohim keeps resounding in my head. You take a lot upon yourselves. It is. Yes, indeed. It's a very important comment, I think, that one. You take a lot on yourselves. It's absolutely. We are like parents to them. And it is that, I suppose, nobility. We're in charge, and it's our God-given right, and we're like mother and father to that kind of thing. It is, yeah. I suppose it's how they see themselves. But yeah, so we and I said I think that wee bit there is just a wee bit sad for Jessica. I think just Leto's, who's this guy? Oh, he's this guy. He's brilliant. He's fantastic. And don't you can't he might as well have a "I'm here to help if you need it" sign put on his head, and Leto can't read it. If you know what I mean. Esmer Turek is definitely a way out for the Atreides, and a very real one. And also, even by the end of the banquet scene, I suppose an ally in a sense, So we're back to the dining room, and Jessica disengages her arm, allows Leto to seat her. He strides down to the end of the table, where a footman, probably a soldier dressed as a footman, holds his chair for him. And we get a little bit of this swishing of fabrics, scraping of chairs, all of these noises as everybody's sitting down, but the Duke remains standing. And I've put there, this is theatre. It's a bit like everybody getting ready for the play to begin, isn't it? And we have a signal as they emerged into the dining. Where are we? He gave a hand signal, and the house troopers in footman uniform around the table stepped back, standing at attention. I've just made a wee note: wolves in sheep's clothing. The footmen, that's. And that must be rehearsed. I thought so. An uneasy silence falls over the room. Soldiers. Yeah. So Jessica, at this point, can see a faint trembling of Leto's mouth, the dark flush of anger on his cheeks. And what has angered him? She wonders. Surely not my invite to Turek. Surely I haven't done it. And questions of my changing customs. Oh, sorry, we'll get to that in a wee second. That's what she wonders, isn't it? It's I wonder, is this, have I done this? Is he that angry? What has angered him is the bit that I found funny, because he hasn't been in a state other than anger for quite some time in the book. I think it's just degrees of anger, and then he'd moved up to rage, and then I think back down to anger, a normal anger. So again, possibly thinking that she's to blame here. And off we go. This is the Leto show, and this some question my changing of the laving basin custom. Leto said, "This is my way of telling you that many things will change," which is an aggressive statement, I suppose. There's again embarrassed silence, and Jessica observes that they think him drunk. And I put, why? He's not hammered or anything, is he? And it must be because of his anger, the way he's behaving. He lifts his water flagon, holds it aloft in the light. He tells us he's a chevalier of the Imperium, and he gives you a toast. He's a knight of the Empire. Everybody grabs their flagons, all eyes on the Duke. The sudden stillness, his hawk features in the shadows. And here is his toast: "Here I am, and here I remain." Again, quite an egotistical toast. And I think this is all quite funny. Let me see. I've put down, where are we? Oh, we've well ahead of my notes here. There was an abortive movement of flagons towards mouths. Stopped as the Duke remained with arm upraised. My toast is one of those maxims so dear to our hearts. Business makes progress. Fortune passes everywhere. Mm. And he sips his water, still standing, and others join him, questioning glances. Everybody's confused by this. I've made a wee note, by the way. I don't know if anybody knows this, but a synonym for the word business is anxiety. The word business means to be anxious. I always thought it's an interesting one. So he sips his water. Again, this is all very awkward and questioning glances. And he calls for Gurney to play a tune. And it turns out Gurney's in an alcove up above, and he decides to pick a minor chord, goes for a sad tune. And we have the servants starting to serve plates of food at the Duke's gesture, releasing them. So this is all ritual, isn't it? It's ritual and theatre. And they start to serve the food, I suppose. And of course, the thing that keeps happening here is that he's not done, is he? And he's and here we go. But just very briefly, we have the menu. We have roasted desert hare in a sauce capetta. We have apple maze Syrian, chukka under glass, which I think chukka is maybe a chuk, like a chicken under glass, possibly a pheasant under glass. Just wondering about the meaning of that. Coffee with melange that has a rich cinnamon odor. A true pot-au served with sparkling Caladan wine. Of course, we can get plenty on Caledonian wines in the Dune Encyclopedia. And I was wondering, what is a pot-au? What is a potato, possibly? I've written a spud. Not too sure. And we were talking about the hare, by the way, folks, and what the representation with Liat Kynes. And we were looking at last week. We quite jokingly, well, it wasn't jokingly. It was we looked up the constellation myth to see if there was any kind of relationship between that myth and Liat Kynes, because of the little hare symbol, and we went probably not. But the association with the hare in Irish mythology is a quite an important one. And the one thing that you're not meant to do is eat hare. It's really bad luck. So we're going to have a couple of courses of hare, and I just thought it was interesting in terms of all the animals that they could have picked. We have roast desert hare, and I've just put bad luck, ill omen, if you like. And of course, so the food's going down, and we get a little sense of the food. It sounds wonderful and exotic, and the flavors and so on. Leto's still standing, and we get this tension, I suppose, building within the room, I suppose, with the guests not knowing whether they can dig in or not. Leto's still standing. And as the guests waited, their attention torn between the dishes placed before them and the standing Duke. And we get another little speech from him, followed by another toast. In olden times, it was the duty of the host to entertain his guests with his own talents. Oh no. Oh no, he's going to entertain us. This could go really bad depending on what hobbies your Duke has. But in this case, I'm not sure if he has any talents. His knuckles are turning white as he grips the flagon so tightly. And he gives us this toast. Where are we? The words, I cannot sing. Okay, so I don't have a talent, so I'm going to give you the words from Gurney's song. Consider it another toast, a toast to all who've died, bringing us to this station. So again, more death thoughts. And at this point, Jessica is having again, it's all very uncomfortable, isn't it? An uncomfortable stirring sounded around the table. Jessica lowered her gaze, glanced at the people nearest her. So the water shipper's woman, pale and austere, Guild Bank representative, and of course Turek. I guess that's oh, so she's just checking out the room. Sorry, I thought she was picking up stuff on there. We just get a bit more description, really, don't we? Buten's woman, the Guild banker, is pale and austere, and he seemed like a whistle-faced scarecrow. His eyes are focused on Leto. Turek, rugged, scar-faced, and has the blue within blue eyes that are kept sort of down. Um, and then we get another one from Leto. Oh, is this guy ever going to shut up and let us eat? Leto's review, friends. The troops long past review. I just said I'll read this here. The Duke intoned. All to fate a weight of pains and dollars. Their spirits wear our silver collars. Review, friends. Troops long past review. Each a dot of time without pretence or guile. With them passes the lure of fortune. Review, friends. Troops long past review. When our time ends on its rictus smile, we'll pass the lure of fortune. And he allows his voice to trail off on the last line, took a deep drink from his water flagon, slammed it back onto the table, water slopped over the brim onto the linen, and the others drank in embarrassed silence. Dear, oh dear, water. Right. So, Leto pours his water on the floor, knowing that the others must do so. I've just made a question. I wonder, is this water for the dead? And Jessica, of course, is the first to follow his example. But we're told that this creates a frozen moment before the others do so. And Jessica notes Paul is observing. And so I suppose our observations of this is a very interesting thing. It's fascinating what the guests' actions reveal, especially amongst the women, we're told. This is clean, potable water. It's not castaways in sopping towels. There seems to be a reluctance to dispose of it has been revealed across the room. There's trembling hands, delayed reactions, nervous laughter, a violent obedience to the necessity, we're told. One woman dropped hers, looked the other way as her male companion recovered it. Oops, and a kind of, oh no, what have I done? A polite mistake type thing. And out of all the people that in the room, the one that grips Jessica's attention the most with the response to this is Liat Kynes. We told that he hesitated, then emptied his cup into a container beneath his jacket, and he smiles at Jessica as he notices her watch him. And then he raises his flagon in a silent toast and seems completely unembarrassed. Oh, I need fluids. Goodness gracious. Cynthia saying potaway can refer to a meat pie. I'd had a wee looked it up earlier, Cynthia, to see if that's kind of where I went with it on just using the web, I suppose. But But I was wondering if it was maybe one of those words where they've just dropped a letter out or something, to show how language changes over time. But yeah, meat pies. Oh, and then I wonder what the word is. It a true patouille? Patouille. I think yeah. I wonder, is it here? Let me see. A couple of years back, we took my son up to Carrickfergus Castle. Let me see. Bear with me one wee second, folks. I wonder, is it sitting right in front of me? I think it might be here somewhere. And if I can't find it, I'll not waste your time. Hang on a wee second. Let me see. Carrickfergus Castle. That's not it, is it? No. I'll just keep talking, folks. Oh well. I must maybe see if I can dig it out for you. It's a Norman castle. Excuse me. And it's entirely intact. If you want to look it up on the Wikipedia or something like that, Carrickfergus Castle, the Rock of Fergus. Very important castle, and it's a Norman castle. It's in excellent condition. It's one of the best castles you'll find. Pardon me, of that era, and it's a Norman castle up near about 20 miles north of Belfast. There's like surviving. We know what they ate and what kind of feasts they had and stuff, and I don't know if I still have it, but one of the little things that you could get when I was up at the castle, I used to go to school next door to it, so I'd actually been on like several trips to it when I was a little kid. But they had a kind of menu of swans' noses and all of these weird kind of medieval foods, and I may have a copy of it. The banquet in this sort of reminds me on that. But yeah, it's quite an interesting menu actually. It said a lot about I suppose certain animals, flora and fauna of the area at the time. But if you want to check it out, I'll spell it out for you. Actually, it's a really cool castle. There you go, Carrickfergus Castle. A gorgeous castle, actually. Don't think it's ever been taken by force, but I think it might have been taken by subterfuge. And there's some really big cannons and stuff on it, but it overlooks the Belfast Bay, I suppose, if you like. So Halleck's music, I think this bit's great. I don't know about you. I'm not too impressed by Gurney Halleck's musical skills. Halleck's music still wafted over the room, but it had come out of its minor key, lilting and lively now, as though he were trying to lift the mood. We're discussing this with my wife earlier, but we tend to use the word waft generally with the word fart. It's a word that's associated with farts. That's a fart will waft through the room, and it's often that you don't well in this country anyway that you don't use the word waft with anything else. So I just thought it was quite funny, and I apologize if nobody else gets it, but his music wafted over the room. I think like a bad smell. As though he was trying. Anyway, he's changed key from minor to hopefully major and trying to lift the mood. And finally, let the dinner commence. There we go. We get Jessica's thoughts here. Leto's angry and uncertain. The loss of the factory crawler couldn't have hurt him that bad, could it? It must be something more than that loss. He acts like a desperate man. And I've put in bravura question mark there, my own little comment. And again, we get this sudden bitterness for Jessica. Why not? He is desperate, and it's a real moment of realism and not total. Must be something more than that. Unless he acts like a desperate man. Why not? He is desperate. It's not that he's acting. He is actually desperate. Just realistic bitterness. Just a little moment of, I don't know. Again, you feel sort of sorry for Jessica at this point, I suppose. Of course, slowly at first, the increasing animation dinner gets going. The still sit manufacturer complimented Jessica on her chef and wine. And this is a thing with the still sit manufacturer, I suppose. They're both from Caledon. It's lovely to get that. Superb, simply superb. Not a hint of melange in it. One gets so tired of the spice and everything. And it's a thing with him the food is a kind of part of his pattern, as we'll see later. Excuse me. So it's nice to get what we get from that. Really, is it's nice to have food and drink that doesn't have melange in it. It's a nice change. So the guild bank representative starts poking at Kynes again. I understand that another factory crawler has been lost to a worm, and news travels fast. Interjects Leto. Snaps out loud. News. Yes, it's true. Then it's true. Yep. So I made a note that basically Leto's outburst here gives it away. And on he goes with his childish outburst. Blasted carryall, not possible. Or no carryall. No one saw it leave. And of course, Kynes repeats this lesson that we learned in the previous chapter, that the spotters keep their eyes on the sand. They're primarily looking for worm sign. A carryall's complement usually 4 men, 2 pilots and 2 journeyman attachers. If one of the crew is basically one of the Duke's foes, it's pretty easy to bump off the rest of the crew. Which is pretty much what's happened. Again, this we're kind of being the fact. Is that possible that this could have happened? It is exactly what happened. And of course, that it's true. Of course, it's true. The blasted carryall disappeared. Shouldn't have been possible for anything that big to disappear. Yep. If one or even 2 of this crew were in the pay of the Duke's foes. I see, said the banker. And you, as judge of the change, do you challenge this? Now, there's a little bit of politicking and intrigue going on here. And simply put, Kain's answers that I will consider my position, not going to discuss this at this table. This is his external response, but his internal response that this pale skeleton of a man knows and how that this kind of infraction was one that I've been instructed to ignore. So this guild banker has almost basically outed Kynes' imperial instructions, which he's trying to keep hid. And the banker smiles, and it's a little victory for the banker here. And all of this leads to Jessica's espionage and counter-espionage school memories. I like, if you like, from to put the Bene Gesserit school days. I think this is quite interesting. So obviously there's a bit of intriguing here, and I think depending on how you want to look at it, Frank's going to point it out for us here a wee bit. Let's see. So 77, where are we at? Remembering a lecture from her Bene Gesserit school days with fun. The subject had been espionage and counter-espionage. A plump, happy-faced Reverend Mother had been the lecturer, her jolly voice contrasting weirdly with the subject matter. So the teacher in a real contrast to the subject. We're told a fair wee bit here, running through it. That let me see. Oh, this isn't enough. A thing to maybe just read this actually. A thing to note about any espionage and or counter espionage school is the similar basic reaction pattern of all its graduates. Any enclosed discipline sets its stamp, its pattern upon its students. That pattern is susceptible to analysis and prediction. Now, motivational patterns, and this is quite important here, are going to be similar among all espionage agents. That is to say, there will be certain types of motivation that are similar despite differing schools or opposed aims. You will study first how to separate this element for your analysis. In the beginning, through interrogation patterns that betray the inner orientation of the interrogators. Secondly, by close observation of language thought orientation of those under analysis. You will find it fairly simple to determine the root languages of your subjects, of course, both through voice inflection and speech pattern. So that's what she's remembering from Bene Gesserit school days. There's been similar basic reaction patterns in all spy schools graduates, basically. An enclosed discipline sets its stamp, its pattern upon its students, and therefore those patterns are susceptible to study and analysis. People behave a certain way if they're taught certain things. The motivational patterns in espionage students are going to be similar. So in terms of motivation, first learn how to separate this element for analysis. In other words, motivation. And how you do it in terms of this lesson, by beginning, the first thing they do is they study interrogation patterns, and their use of them by interrogators. And then it becomes close observation. The second method for studying this, close observation of language, thought orientation of those under analysis. But if you do this, then it's easy enough to determine of your subjects what their root languages are. Voice inflections, speech patterns, these kind of things. Now, this little daydream brings us, at this point, it takes us back to Jessica's school days, and we have a little snap back to the now. Now, sitting at the table with her son and her duke and their guests, hearing the guild bank representative, Jessica felt a chill of realization. So all of this education from a long time ago kicks in at this moment, that the lesson that she's recalling makes her realize the banker is a Harkonnen agent, and that he has the giddy prime speech pattern. It's his speech that gives him away. It's subtly masked, but it's easily exposed to her training. And it makes her ask a really, really worrying question. Does this mean that the guild are on our case too, basically? She's shocked by this thought, because that means then, is there no way out? She wants to hear the bankers. Waits to hear the banker's shift in conversation. She's got his pattern. He'll say something innocent, followed by something with ominous overtones. And as she observes him, someone tells Leo of arcane plants that have no thorns. So the banker and Jessica, and this cue, this banker's pattern, starts talking about carrion eaters. Let's see. 81. There we go. So here we go. His pattern, something innocent. Here it is. I enjoy watching the flights of birds on Arrakis, followed by something with ominous overtones. Directing his words at all of our birds, of course, are carrion eaters, and many exist without water, having become blood drinkers. So there's that pattern. He says something quite nice and banal, something innocent, followed by something a bit dodge. So the still suit manufacturer's daughter pops in at this point. Oh, hello. Oh, look at this. Excellent. Thank you very much. I've got coffee and I've got juice from my loving wife. Thank you, dear. I've still got a bit of a beer. I've got all the fluids going here. I'll try and drink the beer quickly because it goes flat when we sit and talk on here. And I don't like drinking beer very much online because I start burping. But yeah, I'd asked my wife, would she mind bringing us up a cup of coffee around 10:30 or so? But excellent, that's lovely. No, so the problem with this, does this mean the guild? Sorry, I'm going to back up a wee bit there. Does this mean that the guild are after the Atreides too? The question that's shocked by this thought. Simply put, if there is a way out, if the smugglers, etc., have ships, the way to get to Two-Pile is via the guild, and even they won't give up the location of Two-Pile, which is this either planet or series of planets that renegade houses can go to. So the guild are part of the escape route. And the thought that really shocks her is that if the guild are after the Atreides, then there is no escape. Excuse me. So back to the banker then and his little pattern. He goes from the talking about carrion eaters. He goes from enjoying the flights of the birds. All birds are carrion eaters. Many exist without water and have become blood drinkers. Pardon me. There's the burp. I'm going to take a wee break for a wee second here just to read your comments here. I catch a bit of I'll take a wee sip of coffee, actually. There's Joseph Smith, a Dune fan, saying, hi all. Hi, Joseph. How's it going? Thanks for joining us. Oh, something is saying, interesting that the guild banker says our birds, just like Kine saying my climate. Perhaps this comment reminds people that the guild controls the sky, satellites, and maybe carriers. Hadn't noticed that. Where is he? Hang on, 81. Enjoy watching the flights of birds. All of our birds. Yes, of course. Yeah, I suppose that's interesting. It's the same way. Cynthia, I hadn't noticed that. Thank you. If we go back to the start of the chapter, or not the start of the chapter, sorry, but back to the interaction with the first interaction with Butte. And he talks about customs. Again, we're asking whose customs are they, but it's our customs. Wasn't it? Let me see. Where do we go? Butte, water custom. The whole thing about customs. Yeah. Does the Duke imply criticism of our customs? So possessive, yeah. It could be trying to indicate a little bit of ownership. We own the skies. Still to manufacturer's daughter. What have we got here? Seated between Paul and his father at the other end of the table, twisted her pretty face into a frown and said, "Oh, Susu, you say the most disgusting things." And the banker smiled, and he explains this term. They call me Susu because I'm financial advisor to the Water Peddlers Union. Excuse me. And as Jessica continued to look at him without comment, he added, "Because of the water seller's cry, su su suk," and he imitated the call with such accuracy that many around the table laughed. Su su suk, su su suk. So, and I think that's quite funny. Her pet name for him is Susu. Mm. So, if we have a wee look at the back of the book, in the terminology of the Imperium, I think this is one that's here. It is. So, Susu Suk is the water seller's cry on Arrakis. Suk is a marketplace. And it says, see, Ikut A. Let me see. I have another reference. Let's go where that, see where that takes us. Ikut A is also the cry of the water seller on Arrakis. Etymology uncertain. See Susu Suk. So a little sort of cyclical thing there. But Susu is his nickname because he's yeah. This is quite appalling actually. I think as much as we figured out what Leto had stopped the custom of the laving basins earlier, and basically terminated that woman's source of income from that. We're told that there's a water sellers union, and who's to say that she wasn't a part of it? You see what I mean? Um, yeah, and the idea of having a union for water sellers, it's a bit bonkers, isn't it? Um, it's also the comment, I suppose. Where are we? Oh, I've lost her there. Where are we? This water sellers daughter. Hello, Noodles. Got a doggy under my feet. Yeah, I suppose what was it she was talking about? The birds being the most. You say the most disgusting things to her still suit manufacturer. And the boastful tone of this voice, but noted most that the young woman had spoken on cue, a set piece. And this again. We were mentioning this earlier, guys. We were talking about anybody who's got anything to do with water. Water is the ultimate source of power on Arrakis. The woman has spoken on cue. It's a boastful tone, set piece. She glances at Butte, scowling, and this is him saying, "I too control water on Arrakis." Paul notes the falseness of it all, decides to play the foil, and wants to draw them out. Now, I've just made a wee note here that we've got a couple of fencing terms here. Foil is a fencing weapon, and I think we'll have a riposte, etc. Coming up. But yeah, decides let's poke back at these people. Ask the question: Do you mean birds are cannibals? And of course, we get this. This is a great little scene, I think, in this chapter. That's an odd question. Birds drink blood doesn't necessarily mean they have to be their own kind. And Paul's response here is a grown-up response, and it's there's nothing wrong with my question. It's not an odd question. And again, we were told he has this brittle riposte. There's another one of those fencing terms, and he's decided to engage, hasn't he? He's decided to poke at this guy. So the way he responds is condescending. Most educated people know that the worst potential competition, here we go, one of our ecological lessons in this chapter, for any young organism is its own kind. And in this little lesson, Paul takes a bite of food from his companion's plate. I suppose I've made it quite funny. I suppose if you think about all the things to do with poison, everybody's got their own individual poison snoopers. But there's one in the ceiling. He eats it, and I suppose teaches by example here. And says, well, we all eat from the same bowl. We have the same basic requirements. And this causes the banker to stiffen, doesn't like being spoken to like this, I suppose. And scowls at Paul's father. So, which is one of those, I suppose, he's got a problem with Paul. He can't speak to Paul directly. He has to have a bit of a moan about it to his father. And scowled at the Duke. Duke later responds, again, don't make the error of thinking my son a child. And we have a lot of that in this chapter, the difference between Paul as a child and a man. And I suppose that's juxtaposed with Leto's behavior, isn't it? that he's been quite childish in many ways up until now. So the poor banker's misfortune here means the following. I've put that we get a sense of what's happening in the room, and certain allegiances are starting to form here. And I've simply put that banker's misfortune here means the following. Butte has brightened up. Turek is smiling. Kynes is smiling. These two are basically grinning. And you get a sense that sides and allegiances, alliances of mutual interest, things that are aligning together, mutual ideas are aligning here. There we go. And I have finished my notebook, folks. I've written go to notebook number 2 for note number 87 in chapter 16, Kynes' rule of ecology. Just to show, I'm going to take a wee short break and run to blow my nose and possibly go to the. But there you go, folks. This is what we've done so far. I don't know if I can actually show you that properly, but goodness gracious, we've taken a lot of notes. There we are, all the way. So we're going to start. That's our Dune book club notes on up to chapter 16. Goodness gracious! And so I've time to start a new notebook, which I've done. Oh, let me see. Now, let me just put that somewhere safe for now. There we go. I wonder how many of these we're going to end up with. Dune Book Club Volume 2. So if you don't mind, folks, I'll use this as an opportunity to take a wee quick break, and I'll catch up with some of your comments as well. Goodness gracious. But I really must blow my nose, so excuse me a wee second, and we'll get right back at it. Hello, back again. Intermission over. I've got to get a wee bit of fluids. My throat's getting a wee bit rough, folks. So I'm going to take a wee quick second to have a sip of beer here and actually try and get rid of this beer and get onto my coffee before it gets cold. Hang on. There we go. Oh dear. Right. Let's see. I'm going to grab a wee quick puff of a smoke before we start back. So let's see. Oh, dear, it's an enormous chapter, folks. I've been working at this one. I've still got, I think we're about up to 87, and we have about 137 to go. So we're going well through these. Sometimes I feel it's a bit of a shame with these big chapters, because you really do. I think the last one, I felt a sense of trying to rush. I personally thought I was trying to rush through it a wee bit just because there was so much to cover, and I promised myself I wouldn't do that today. I'm going to take my sweet time with it, and if we'll get through it, we'll get through it. And I figured if it comes to it and it ends up being ridiculously long, we could even split it into two. But we'll get there, no problem. I think there's just so much in this chapter, and I'll take a wee second just to check your comments here. Interesting. The guild and Cynthia says interesting. Oh yeah, just read that one. I'll read it again. Interesting. The guild banker says our birds just like Kynes saying my climate. Perhaps this comment reminds people that the guild controls the sky, satellites, and maybe carriers. And Joseph Smith says it goes well. Yeah, thank you for asking. Happy to be here. Good to have you, Joseph. Sook. I so wish that I'd been in the Danny version. I'm. Do you know something? I think I'm still in a couple of minds about the Danny Villeneuve version of Dune, and I'm not really ever going to be able to consider it properly until I see the finished product, I suppose. But the banquet scene, just in terms of extraneous stuff that they've written that has nothing to do with Dune and hasn't very little relevance, and the amount of time that it takes up on screen, this scene here could have been in the film, no problem. And the fact that, yeah, it's a massive scene for Kynes. It's really important. And in terms of what we're about to learn, we're going to find out a few things here. We've got Liebig's law of the minimum, and we have Arthur Tansley and all coming up here. We've got real ecological lessons, real world stuff that's really a big part of what Frank wanted to do with this book. That's why he did the WLP thing. It's why there's readings of him doing this chapter. It's a really important chapter, and arguably one of the most important chapters in the book, I think. And in terms of informing of us of what's going on, but particularly within the power play and the politics, there's loads here, but we really get to see it kind of, I suppose, not the full ins and outs of it, but more just the Machiavellian nature of it, I suppose. Cynthia saying, going back a bit, regarding Jessica's hope for Turek, do the smugglers have their own form of travel, starships independent of the guild? I've never quite figured this out. No, well, as far as I know, what I think the situation is that the smugglers do have their own ships, frigates. So in terms of, I think they basically have ships that can fly, planet to planet, interplanetary ships, I suppose. Maybe not starships, but then it's the guild that actually then transports those ships across the universe, if you like. So I think there's a deal with the smugglers and the guild and renegade houses. Cynthia, if you have a wee look at, let me see, at Tupile, T or Tupile or Tupile, maybe, you never know, Tupile. Tupile in the Imperium terminology of the Imperium, it says the so-called sanctuary planet, probably several planets, for defeated houses of the Imperium, location or locations known only to the guild and maintained inviolate under the guild peace. So renegade houses, whenever they run for it, they do so with the guild's help, and where they end up is either one planet or a series of planets, and the guild won't give that up to anyone. So there is a way out. So I'd imagine, though, that the smugglers have ships, frigates, etc., but they would still need wherever Tupile is, only the guild know. And if I imagine that if the Atreides were going to run, that's where they're going to have to run to. And that kind of carries on later on, Cynthia, by the way, because I think as much as we know that, was it Chapter House of the Bene Gesserit, it's suggested that it's not one world at all. When we get down to the last two books, I think that it's a defense mechanism, isn't it, for the Bene Gesserit, that there are actually several. I think there's a real chapter house, if you like, but I think there's also meant to be sort of decoys, if you like, or other ones as well. But yeah, I think that's the case. So this says, thanks. I was asking this to help me think about the relationship between the guild banker and Turek. Yeah. Well, he's not a guild. I don't know. It's the language here. It's guild banker or guild banker's representative. He represents the guild bank. That's his job. So, but he is a Harkonnen. And again, I imagine the guild's a school, so they again probably recruiting people from all sorts of areas of different planets and so on, if you like. So yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting one. Again, but I think you get the sense maybe with spies as well that possibly if he's a guild banker's representative, he's a Harkonnen agent. It's possible that he's been implanted a long time ago. There really is a Cold War sense about all of this kind of stuff. That there's probably even the discussion of, do you think Jessica might know her parents and that we might kill them? Is that kind of thing, or even the sense of like sleeper agents? I think. But yeah, I'm trying to remember it myself. And a lot of what happens here, interestingly enough, in terms of the film, there's really important relationships or allegiances or alliances, if you like, that are developed simply because of this dinner party. And in terms of what happens and help offered, etc., later on, would make no sense if you hadn't really seen what the interactions here. Um, and just I suppose I better keep that other book. Oh, it's on the shelf behind me in case I need to refer back to it. Um, but this is the part where we start to get rolling with the kind of some of the ecology stuff as well. And there we are. And you get these little Butte has even Butte, by the way, as much as Kynes is a bit hostile to Butte, I don't think Butte's seen as any real kind of threat. It's just Butte's kind of just there for himself, I think. You get that sense from him anyway. He's there to make money. He's a merchant, and so here we go. This is Kynes, I suppose, interjecting on Paul's behalf, but it's a rule of ecology, and this is a lot of our ecological stuff coming here. It's a rule of ecology, Kynes said, that the young master appears to understand quite well. The struggle between life elements is the struggle for the free energy of a system. Blood's an efficient energy source. So the banker is still angry, puts down his fork. It's said that you get the venom even in the writing. It's said that the Fremen scum drink the blood of their dead. You get indicators in language. The word scum there is pretty bad. And Kynes responds in a lecturing tone. I think this is quite cool. You get the level of coolness with Kynes here. And it's not the blood, sir, he says. It's all of a man's water belongs to his people, to his tribe, if you like. And it's a necessity if you live near the Great Flat. All water's precious there. Human body, we're told, is 70% water by weight. And a dead man surely no longer needs that water. That is a threat, by the way. An absolute but again, nobody's very subtle here, I think. I think they're all pretending to be, well, the language suggests that they're trying to be subtle, but not really. The banker has both hands on the table and get a sense that he might leave in a rage. Is that Jessica thinking that? Jessica thought he was going to push himself back, leave in a rage. Kynes looked at Jessica. Forgive me, my lady, for elaborating on such an ugly subject at table. But you were being told falsehood, and it needed clarifying. So he's basically just called this guy a liar. And he's done it in quite a polite way, I suppose. And the banker's response is that, again, it's how dare you be so impolite, almost. It's funny. You've associated so long with Fremen that you've lost all sensibilities, the banker rasped. And that's basically him saying you've lost your manners a bit, that you've been hanging around with these Fremen, these scum that drink the blood of their dead. And we get that the tension shifts here quite really, and we get this point. That's it. Kynes is going to call this man out, I think. And it's just, it's the tension's building. The various sort of groups are sort of poking at each other, but this is one where it's going to be put down quite harshly, I think. Calmly studying the pale, trembling face. Are you challenging me, sir? And I often point out that whenever people are polite like that, I myself included, that it's not good. When there's an over level of politeness, it often suggests something deadly or dangerous is coming. And it's kind of pretty much almost a challenge to a duel. The banker froze, swallowed, spoke stiffly. Of course not. I would, and again, this kind of directing it elsewhere. I wouldn't insult our hosts. And Jessica sort of observing him, fear in his voice, fear in his face, in his breathing, his pulse at the vein in his temple. The man is terrified of Kynes. And of course, which is very interesting, Kynes doesn't allow for this kind of sort of misdirection. Oh, I wouldn't insult the hosts. The hosts can answer for themselves. You're insulting me. He's not letting him away with it. And he makes a really interesting little comment here. Really does show you how his thinking towards the Atreides has changed. Has certainly mellowed anyway. Our host and hostesses are quite capable of deciding for themselves when they've been insulted, Kynes said. They're brave people who understand defense of honor. We all may attest to their courage by the fact that they are here now on Arrakis. And yeah, pretty much, don't slag these people off. They're brave. And the fact that they're sitting on this mad planet, with all of this nonsense, shows you how brave they are. Don't drag them into your nonsense. And again, we get a lot of movement and observation moving between the different characters, the Atreides. We see Paul looking, Jessica looking, Leto observing. Jessica checks Leto out, sees that he's enjoying this. And I suppose that's in contrast. And it's an interesting comment because we're also told that most of the other people in the room are not enjoying it. This is really not comfortable. That people are pretty much poised for flight, have hands under the table, and there are two notable exceptions. Butte, who's smiling, and Turek, who seems to be waiting for some sort of cue to act. I'm online, son. It's okay. You might want to keep your inner monologue internal. Sorry, it's just my son there. He's just down and about. Just close the door over there. Ah, dear, oh dear. So, where did we go? And at this point, we're told Paul's looking at Kynes with admiration. And interestingly, Kynes still, there's almost a bit of deflection here. Kynes doesn't let him away with it. Pardon me. Let me see if I find my correct note. Yeah, I'm waiting for my apology. I meant no offense, the banker muttered. If offense was taken, please accept my apologies. There we go. Freely given, freely accepted. He smiled at Jessica, resumed eating as though nothing had happened. So it was all very nonchalant. And we get the apology from Kynes. And Jessica notes that Turek relaxes, and at this point realizes that there's an accord between Turek and Kynes. Some sort of accord. And if both of these men represent kind of their groups, then that is an accord between the Fremen and the smugglers. And we have Leto toying with a fork, looks at Kynes speculatively. The ecologist's manner towards the Atreides has changed. Kynes seemed colder on the trip to the desert. Well, yeah, they just met. He kind of sort of threatened him a bit and this kind of thing. It wasn't the best trip, really, was it? So we get more food and drink coming out with another course. And we're told that they're served langue de lapin de Garenne. And I was all pleased with myself. I went, no, that's hare, isn't it? That's rabbit. And tongues of rabbit. And of course, I was gutted to find out that Jessica, I think, explains it for me in a second. So I made a nice wee note of it, only for her to explain again. Wild rabbit tongue, wild hare. And again, I'll just put bad luck. And it actually got me thinking about the brace of conies in the Lord of the Rings as well. These wild rabbit tongues done in a red wine and sauce of mushroom yeast. It's all very MasterChef, I have to say. But in terms of that mythological association, 2 unlucky meals in a row. So Jessica observes as slowly the dinner conversation resumes. There's a bit of agitation around a bit of a brittle quality to it. The banker sits in sullen silence. And he's had a kind of wee societal put down here, but he'll live, that kind of thing. But the moment sort of gives Jessica a kind of a realization about Kynes. Simply put, Kynes is dangerous. Kynes would have killed him, no problem. Kynes would have killed the banker. I've written down, Kynes would have killed this guy, A-OK, no problem at all. He has an offhand attitude towards killing. And then she senses, very importantly, he was a casual killer, and that she guesses that this is a Fremen quality. So in much of that sense, what we learn about kinds here, each individual within the banquet scene, I suppose, is really representing their own group, if you like. Right, goodbye, flat beer. Hello, coffee. There we go. That's the way to do it. Now, here we go. Liebig's law of the minimum is approaching. This is quite interesting, folks. Oh, hang on. Did I miss something here? I did actually. Bear with me a wee second. Turns to the still suit manufacturer who's continually amazed by... sorry, this is Jessica, isn't it? Right. So everything's been diffused a wee bit. Jessica says, I myself am continually amazed by the importance of water on Arrakis. And this guy, again, very important, he agreed. What is this dish? It's delicious. Tongues of wild rabbit in a special sauce, she said, a very old recipe. I must have that recipe, the man said. She nodded. I'll see that you get it. Now, if we make a wee, it's quite an important wee thing here. I've just put mindless banter, actually. What's the recipe? This is his pattern. And we mentioned it briefly. You must give me you'll see him do it again, actually, before this is finished. His pattern is, you must give me this recipe, etc. And it'll turn out that Jessica sort of gets a good register of this guy, the still suit manufacturer, and realizes that he can be bought, I believe. So Kynes answers here for her. Means that the importance of the Arrakis importance of water on Arrakis. And Kynes looked at Jessica and says, the newcomer to Arrakis frequently underestimates the importance of water here. You're dealing, you see, with the law of the minimum. Now, this is really interesting, actually. I never knew anything about the law of the minimum, Liebig's barrel, or any of this stuff, actually, whenever I started doing my work on Dune. So I chased up every little kind of hint and clue. And so we have an awful lot of scientists named, you'll get a lot of scientists' names within character names. And in this case, we've got a couple of things coming up here, but we have the law of the minimum, also known as Liebig's law of the minimum. And this is really interesting, named after Justus von Liebig, though it's not actually his idea. He's the guy that made it famous, if you like. So the original idea is from a guy called Karl Sprengel. You can check them out on Wikipedia if you like. And yeah, the law of the minimum, Liebig's law of the minimum, or Liebig's barrel. Liebig is spelled Liebig. Liebig's barrel really is an excellent little diagram, that concept that explains all of that in one illustration. I think it's on my community page somewhere, but it'll be way back at the beginning. So he's presenting us with real ideas of ecological ideas here, not quite putting in Liebig's name. I don't know really why, but the underestimate the importance of water. You're dealing with the law of the minimum. There's a testing quality in his voice, I suppose, from Kynes, and I put that, is it testing her? And it could also be sort of testing us, I suppose, in a way. But off we go if we look this stuff up. Growth is limited by the thing which is present in the least amount. And the least favorable condition controls the rate of growth. This is Jessica's response. It's rare to find members of great houses aware of planetological problems. And in relation to growth, water is the least favorable condition for life on Arrakis. Growth itself can produce unfavorable conditions unless it's treated with extreme care. Out of control economic growth, that kind of thing. It's all sorts of things. It's well, yeah. There's too much growth can be a bad thing. So the Liebig's barrel essentially would show you a barrel with different heights of staves. If you imagine my fingers were the staves of the barrel, and that water can only go as high as the lowest stave, if you see in the barrel. So it's limited by the least favorable condition. So that Liebig's barrel is simply an illustration of a barrel that has different length pieces of wood making up the construction of the barrel. And of course, it demonstrates clearly that you can only fill water up as high as the lowest piece of wood that can made up to construct that barrel, if that makes sense. And therefore, it's the amount of growth, the amount of water in that case that the barrel can hold is based upon the least favorable, the weakest, the smallest of all the staves, if you like. Stave probably is the right word I'm looking for. So it's yeah, check it out. It's quite interesting. And as I said, it's not really Liebig's idea, but he's the guy that popularized it. So we're getting our ecological lessons here. There are limits to growth, by the way. I think is also Paul Bigelow Sears' book, excuse me, which is a massive influence on Frank Herbert, humongous influence on him. And I believe is also one of the books that leads him to Frank. If you're aware of this book, it discusses environmental issues, and it also discusses Samuel Butler's Erewhon. And yeah, I've caught Frank referring and pretending not to refer to this kind of stuff, if you like, but it is very interesting indeed. So Jessica seems to think that there is a hidden message in Keynes's words. Is she missing it? Growth. Do you mean Arrakis can have an orderly cycle of water to sustain human life under more favorable conditions? Oh, let me just catch that. And this comment provokes a response from Butte, who's not happy about it at all. Impossible. The water magnet bark. Jessica turned her attention to Butte. Impossible. Impossible on Arrakis, he said. Don't listen to this dreamer. All the laboratory evidence is against him. We get 3 impossibles there. Laboratory evidence is against him. This is Butte's argument, and it's quite an important one. Keynes sort of responds. Let me see. Laboratory evidence blinds, all of this blinds us to a simple fact. Matters that originate and exist outside, where plants and animals carry on their normal existence, that's one thing. Basically, he's saying that the laboratory works inside the laboratory, and that to understand this stuff, that you need to step outside the lab. If you see what I mean, go and that's very much there. That's an idea that's linked to general semantics. The map is not the territory. This kind of thing. So, of course, it says there's nothing normal about Arrakis, but Keynes actually says quite the contrary. So there are things that are normal about here. Well, what are they? Well, there are certain harmonies. There are self-sustaining lines. You have to understand that there are limits of a planet and that there are pressures put upon a planet. Butte's dismissive, of course, says it will never be done. And we have another moment, another one of these amazing sudden realizations from Leto, which I think are quite funny. And usually they're wrong, but let's see. It's about where Keynes's attitude changed. And he thought that it was when Jessica had spoken of holding the conservatory in trust for the people. So it's not altogether a bad observation, I suppose. Now, we get some questions here. There seems to be a mutual love-in with the Fremen, Keynes, and the Atreides in terms of ecology. Excuse me. What would it take to set up this self-sustaining system? This is Leto's question. So we get an answer. 3% of the green plant element involved in forming carbon compounds as foodstuffs. If you've got that, then you've started a cyclic system. Is water the only problem? And getting into, I've just made a wee note next to this before I go on with this. Keynes's excitement is starting to get caught up in this. Water is not the only problem, we're told, but it overshadows all other problems. So a little bit more about the ecology of Arrakis at this point. We're told the planet has much oxygen without its usual concomitants. What it doesn't have is widespread plant life, large sources of carbon dioxide from things like volcanoes. Doesn't have those. What it does have is unusual chemical interchanges that appear over large surface areas. Bit of a mystery. I like pointing out our mysteries. What's all that about? It's got unusual chemical interchanges over large surface areas. And it has a lot of oxygen. Where's the oxygen come from? This kind of thing, if it doesn't have the plant life. So, have you got any pilot projects in place, asked Leto? And we're told that we have the Tansley effect. And I've written a note here that tells me I should just open the thing up in my PhD and read that to you. Because I've, there we go. Let's find Mr. Tansley. He's an interesting chap. The Tansley effect. So just my wee note here, whatever's happened to this. Graphics card catch up. There we go. The Tansley effect is named here after Sir Arthur George Tansley, 1871 to 1955. He was an English botanist and plant ecologist and is notable for introducing the term ecosystem. First appeared in his paper, A.G. Tansley, July 1935. Here's a great name for a paper, The Use and Abuse of Vegetational Concepts and Terms, which was published in Ecology, Volume 16, Number 3, pages 284 to 307, if anybody wants to check that out. He is considered one of the 20th century's more eminent ecologists and responsible for founding the journals The New Phytologist and The Journey of Ecology, as well as being the founding member and first president of the British Ecological Society. So that is Sir Arthur George Tansley. And it's not just a random name. So this is the name of the man who came up with the term ecosystem here, the Tansley effect, if you like. Tansley's a location name, isn't it, in English? I think I'm trying to remember what it means. I'll just put a wee other thing. The use and abuse of vegetable concepts and terms was his main thing that I suppose he's remembered for. Term ecosystem. Also that he was heavily into Freud and Jung. And just a little bit of trivia about him. He's the person that wrote Freud's obituary notice for the Royal Society. So there we go. The Tansley effect in this case is meant to be small unit experiments that are performed on amateur basis and that draw working facts that draws working facts from these experiments, that science can use it. They can get data. So small kind of lab-like experiments, if you like, or external ones as well. Small amateur experiments that collect data. A good example of that would be kind of things like the weather stations you get in schools. You know, with the kids that use them for their geography projects, etc. And you know, their little rainfall things and all of that data is quite useful. So there we go. So we've had a couple of name drops, really. Sir Arthur Tansley, and of course we've had Liebig's Law of the Minimum. So Butte interjects, there's not enough water. Repeats this. And of course, Keynes rather sarcastically, oh, sorry, I've turned something on there. Keynes rather sarcastically says, well, Master Butte is an expert on water, isn't he? He smiles, really sarcastic. And again, not very subtle, is he? It's kind of almost sarcastic, hinting, almost baiting. And it gets the wrong response from Leto, or probably just the standard response from Leto, sharply with his right hand. Represents agency. Barked like a child. You know, sorry, barked. He didn't bark like a child. I've just written barked and then brackets. He's like a child, isn't he? I want an answer. I want it now. Is there enough water? So his manners aren't great, Leto's, are they? This barking is interrupted by Jessica's observation. This play of emotion that she in her thoughts masks himself well. This is late. She's talking about she had him registered, and then also notes that Leto has regretted his words. But if that's what she reads there, then out he goes. Is there enough water? Either he's carrying on with this, but he demands this. Is there enough water? He demands. Kynes, there may be. And at this point, Kynes is giving himself away, I think. Is this where I've made me note of this? Jessica sees that Kynes is faking uncertainty. And we shift over to Paul's sense about this, and again reiterates this Bene Gesserit lesson that we have Jessica remembering fondly from their days of Bene Gesserit school. Paul's truth sense catches the underlying motive. That lesson about espionage is all about motivation. It had to use every ounce of his training. This is Paul, then to mask his excitement. There is enough water. Kynes just doesn't want it to be known publicly. So I think this is quite an interesting wee bit here. Kynes just doesn't want this out loud. It's as much as he's faking, he just doesn't want to give away certain things to the Atreides' rather indelicate questioning, I suppose. And I think if you think about it, the Atreides just want to know. They really kind of want to know everything about this, don't they? So Bute's a wee bit condescending about, here planetologist has many dreams with the Fremen, And, oh, ladies, behave. Sorry about that. And we get mention of prophecies and messiahs. And we get chuckles around the table at odd places. And we see that Jessica is wanting to know who's doing the chuckling. Well, the smuggler, Turek's chuckling. The still suit manufacturer's daughter is laughing. Duncan Idaho's giggling. And the woman who may be the madam of the escort service, I call her the Madam Mentat. She's more than it's a cover, isn't it? So, and she notes that the tension is oddly distributed amongst the room. There's too much unknowns. And she decides that she needs new information sources. Oh, now, this is this wee moment where Duke Leto's gaze runs around. He sees, goes from Kynes to Bute to Jessica. And we were talking about this earlier. He's missed something. He feels oddly let down. As if he missed something I've written. He did. Vital. Maybe we get maybe he doesn't let it drop. That's what Kynes was saying previously. Is there enough water? There may be. Maybe. And I'll just put he fails to read the room here. Kynes spoke quickly. Can we discuss this another time? And he's cut off. At this point, an Atreides trooper, I suppose this is kind of just saved by the bell kind of thing. An Atreides trooper with one of Howit's men pops in and starts to have a chat to Leto. And we're going to see Leto getting ready to leave here. This makes Jessica uneasy. She starts chatting to the still suit manufacturer's companion. We're told she's tiny, has dark hair, doll face, and a touch of an epicanthic fold. Small talk. And we note that the woman looks to the still suit manufacturer before answering. She takes her cues from him. Leto's getting ready to go. He's got this harsh tone of command about him. Tells everyone to stay seated. Forgive me. This requires my personal attention. Paul's going to take over as host. And Paul's going to play this in grand manner, as we're told. He takes Leto's seat. Leto asks Gurney to take Paul's place. And we're told so there's no odd numbers at the dinner table, which is a wee bit of a superstition, isn't it? Whenever the dinner's over, bring yourself and Paul to the command post. So we're told Gurney Halleck's dress uniform, his lumpy ugliness make him seem out of place from all the pretty people. The pretty things. We're told there's no need for alarm. No one leaves until the guard says it's safe. And this little trouble should be cleared up. Of course, we don't know what it is. But there are code words there for the Atreides. Guard, safe, secure, shortly. So the problem we're told is that the problem is with security, not violence. And we also know that Jessica's also got this message. So Paul and Jessica kind of relax about it's not doom and gloom, if you like. So Leto wields and strides out of the room, and we leave Paul in charge. And the situation continues on from a moment where Kynes was talking about water, and in this case, where Leto failed to read the situation, Paul's read it correctly. He says, "Can we talk about this another time?" Another time, by all means. No bother. And this is, Paul has picked up on this. This guy doesn't want to talk about this publicly. He's asked me for a way out, and happily give it to him. We can talk about this another time. But Leto, that sense of theatre that I want to force the issue, get it out in public. I want to know everything. I demand, I'm the big boss, this kind of thing. It doesn't really work for him too well. This gives Jessica an enormous sense of pride, doesn't it? And we're told, what is it that makes her pride? What is it that makes her proud? And of course, it's Paul's dignity, his mature sense of assurance. This is how Paul talks to this man, not the way Leto's been talking to people. And I think it's really interesting that we do have that constant kind of compare and contrast Leto and Paul in certain chapters, and how Paul behaves really is very different to his father, you know. Duncan's laughter at mention of Fremen dreams suggests that he is not as aligned ideologically with the Fremen as he claims, or as much as Stilgar might hope, or he's starting to drink the spice beer. Yeah, well, we'll get to that next chapter, isn't it? But don't we? I've got to watch my language here, isn't it? I've got to stop saying that. Yeah, I thought that's he's laughing at these kind of stories, superstitions. Maybe it's just because he doesn't believe in such things like that. But yeah, I wouldn't say he's ideologically aligned with the Fremen at all, and especially when Kynes was ready to have his head sent to Leto previously, so by giving away their secrets, and if he's giving away he's a spy, isn't he? And I suppose Duncan is here, as much as he's swordmaster, he's here to act as a spy as well. Yeah. So we have the relaxed chick. Off Leto goes, and this is the situation. It's a test for Paul. It's a political test. Oh, smoke here, folks. Oh, there we go. Right. So yeah, her pride, as I said, though, not his dignity, his sense of assurance. Her son's grown up. This is going to cause a bit of the father's away. Let's see if we can attack. And the banker uses Butte, I suppose. Banker to Butte says, "Why don't you give a toast? You're the one with the flowery phrases. Why don't you give us a dollop of wisdom for the boy who must be treated like a man?" And I've put passive aggressive. Maybe it's probably just quite aggressive. It's condescending, and he's using someone else to speak through, which generally doesn't go down too well. Certainly not where I'm concerned, anyway. But using Butte as a puppet almost to voice his words. Jessica's right hand clenched fist onto the table. This causes reactions all across the room. Hand signals from Halleck to Idaho. House troopers move to the guard, and I've just put they're all really subtle here, aren't they? There's essentially a house troop has moved as one. Butte casts a venomous glance at the banker. He's been set up here. Butte's not really done any harm. And I just thought this room's become incredibly dangerous for the banker, hasn't it? Really, what possible motivation could you have to go into someone else's house and slabber at them like that, especially when they're all so incredibly dangerous and have armed soldiers, and you don't seem to have any retinue or guards yourself. It's a wee bit. And I think the idea is just to sort of mentally poke at the Atreides rather than outright annoy them. But I think it's easy enough for people to cross the line here. At this point, we get the story of the fisherman's body. Paul decides to tell the story of the fisherman's body to the banker. And this is an interesting little scene here. It gives you, I suppose, one of the juxtapositions between life on Caladan, life on Arrakis. And there are a few things that don't line up, I suppose, but we'll maybe have a wee look at them. But here we go. Once Paul saw a body of a drowned fisherman, and the still suit manufacturer's daughter is the interrupter here. She drowned, and Paul goes, yes, immersed in water until you're dead. Now, I think that's daft that you wouldn't know what to drown is. You don't need to live on a desert planet. I'm sure you could drown on a desert planet, but you can drown in all sorts of ways, and I think for her I think it's a bit of a false question, and it was drown mean as if you wouldn't know. The word, oddly enough, it's mentioned here about linguistic cues. You can drown your sorrows. There's all sorts of words within just English alone. I'm sure lots of phrases to do with drowning. Immersed in water until you're dead, and she murmurs. That's an interesting way to die. This makes Paul. His smile is brittle, and he returns his attention to the banker. The interesting thing he says is that the wounds on the man's shoulders, another fisherman's claw boots. Been one of several fishermen in a boat, and he explains what a boat is. It's a craft traveling along on water. There's no gravy here. There's no gravy boat at the table, is there? Again, that's a bit of an odd one. And the boat foundered, and again he explains that it sank beneath the water. Paul's told by another fisherman that he's seen these wounds have been seen several times on fishermen's bodies, and that they're meant that one of the men stood on the other's shoulders in an attempt to reach the surface to get to air. So, of course, the banker interjects, why is this interesting? He doesn't seem too bothered. And the answer comes, it's a sort of a passive-aggressive kind of thing here. Because of an observation my father made at the time, drowning man doing this is understandable, except when you see it happening inside a drawing room. And Paul hesitates. This is all very deliberate by Paul, by the way. Hesitates for impact. And I might add, when you see it at the dinner table. And that's a threat, just to let you know. And it produces the correct response. There's a sudden stillness in the room. Jessica goes, that was rash. Dear, oh dear. The banker might have enough rank to call out Paul, a possibility of a duel. This has Idaho and Gurney alert. We're told Turek laughs, breaking the tension, and Buick's grinning. So we have this, the smiles. There's smiles around the table. He's been put in his place, but he didn't like it. And the banker pushes his chair back and glares at Paul. So he gives it an aggressive move. And Kynes, of course, speaks out on this. One baits an Atreides at his own risk. The bait is the word bait there is suggestive of a trap, isn't it? The banker puts it that is this the Atreides' custom to insult guests? He turns it back. And at this point, Jessica intervenes. Sir. And again, there's that polite and deadly. We must learn, her thoughts are going on this one. We must learn this Harkonnen creature's game. Is he here for Paul? Does he have help? Her response is this: my son displays a general garment. You claim it's cut to your fit. What a fascinating revelation. So basically she's saying, my son has told a general story, but you're saying that story specifically is about you. Oh, really? That's interesting. Are you the dying man then who's about to climb on someone else's shoulders to get air? That kind of thing. So it's all not going very well for the Guild Bank representative. Again, Jessica has her crysknife on her calf sheath. She's ready for violence. The banker focuses on Jessica, frees himself for action, and he focuses apparently on a code word, which is prepare for violence. So there's certain code words, I suppose, within society here that kind of have general meanings, I think, to everybody. I'm not too sure what the code word was there, but prepare for violence. Kynes looks to Jessica and makes a hand signal to Turek. And Thankfully, we get a toast by Turek here rather than one of Leto's, which are quite dull. The toast by Turek is to Paul Atreides, still a lad by his looks, but a man by his actions. So, as much as Paul's wondering, Jessica's intervened already. Now, Kynes and Turek are intervening on his behalf as well. Jessica's wondering why they intrude. And I suppose it's because they can. But at this point, the guests, the banker, we realize, is looking at Kynes, and the terror that we were told was on his face earlier has now returned. So he sort of thought, I've poked at Kynes earlier, basically crapped himself, decided to have a go at Paul with Leto around, backs off. Once Leto's out the room, he has a go at Paul straight away, and that Kynes pretty much sets himself on Paul's side here. Terror returns to the agent's face. The guests are responding. Jessica notes, where Kynes leads, people follow. He sides with Paul. And what is the secret of his power? Another mystery for us. It's not the fact that he's the judge of the change. That's a temporary position. It's not because he's a civil servant. She's running the problem. Regardless, she gives him a cheers, Kynes, thank you, and leaves her knife alone. Paul's thoughts kind of mirror his mother's, but he's sort of staring at the plate. It's a thing that Jessica does later as well. Paul and the banker are both empty-handed, and he doesn't get it. Why are they intervening? I handled this correctly. Why are they interfering? Prepare for violence. Well, if it wasn't from who from, and is it the banker? Surely not. And I suppose this is one wee incident where he doesn't believe that the banker would react violently. And I'm not too sure if he would, but I think Paul's sense of, is it surely not, that kind of thing. I am serious, and don't call me Shirley. Where are we? Certainly not from that banker fellow. I think he's misread the banker. There, that's the first time, I think. It's not the first time. He's made a couple of minor mistakes, and in this case, it's not a big one, is it? But everybody else in the room's kind of on this guy anyway. Halleck's messing around with let's see, what's Halleck at? All right, 1, 2, 4. Oh, it's Halleck stirred as though he spoke to one in particular, directing his words over the heads of the guests across him. It's to the still suit manufacturer's daughter, isn't it? People shouldn't be quick to take offense. That can be frequently suicidal. That's a threat. Don't you think so, miss? Again, an attempt to divert things away from the situation. She says that there's too much violence, it makes me sick. No offense can be meant, and people can die anyway. And it gives her away a wee bit. This is Jessica's thoughts. The near perfection of the girl's act. She's not an empty, as she puts it, the empty-headed female is not an empty-headed female at all. This moment of realization. And she sees again this pattern, this thread of a pattern, the pattern of the threat, again from her Bene Gesserit lesson. Halleck sees it too. So again, just within the nature of her words, she was planned to lure Paul and attack Paul somehow with sex. Jessica relaxes. Again, this is what we were saying earlier, that we think that, that if it's an attack via sexual trap or lure, that it seems that Paul's been well trained, etc. And that they see that as a kind of obvious thing. And she says that Paul saw it first, probably. And he would not have overlooked this obvious gambit. So the fact that she missed it, she reckons Paul's very, very wise to this kind of thing. So we have Kynes to the banker again, and quite directly, isn't there an apology in order? And the banker, again, diverting to Jessica, basically says, I fear I've had a bit too much to drink. Your drink's very potent in this house. Basically gives her an apology that's not really an apology, and the venom beneath his tone is detected. And I think this, because of the venom, Jessica responds sweetly. And we again get this other quote: when strangers meet, great allowances should be made for differences of custom and training. Forgives him. Thank you, my lady. So there we go. It's a good statement, isn't it? It's a good truth whenever strangers meet, we should make alliances for the differences that we have. Mm. So we get a little bit more poking and prodding. The intrigue continues with the dark-haired companion of the stillsuit manufacturer saying that the Duke spoke of being secure, hopes that that doesn't mean there's more fighting. And again, we note that this is another female companion who's being directed to lead the conversation a certain way. The response from this, again, is that it's probably unimportant. There are many details that require a Duke's response. But the enmity between the Harkonnens and the Atreides continues. We can't be too careful. The Duke has... Now, this is a wee bit here. I just wanted to ask you guys, actually, maybe I can quickly check this. The Duke has sewn Canley. And I was wondering, is that... Oh, I don't think it is a misprint. I was wondering, is that not sworn? But sewn, fair enough. Makes me think of sewn men. Which is to do with the Theban myth. He will leave no Harkonnen agent alive on Arrakis, of course, and that's a very direct threat. Isn't that right, Dr. Kynes? The conventions support him in this. So isn't that right, Dr. Kynes? That's the legal situation backs him up. He can kill all the Harkonnens. Isn't that right, Dr. Kynes? And I quite like Kynes' response here. Indeed it is. It's another threat to the Harkonnen agents at the table. So the stillsuit man and his companion, they pull back a bit, suggest that they'll eat something, possibly from the bird dish from earlier. And Jessica returns the conversation to the banker and brings it back to birds. Again, Arrakis is interesting to me. Can you tell me where the spice is found? Do the hunters go deep into the desert? Goodness gracious. Oh, there's so much here. How are we doing? We're not doing too bad. Not too much more to go, folks, thank goodness. So, a bit of myths and stories about the deep desert and the southern reaches come along. The banker's response, no, not there. We're told that very little is known of the deep desert and almost nothing known of the southern region. So here comes Kynes, and he says that there are tales of a great motherload of spice in the southern reaches, but that they're imaginative invention. There's a tale that a great motherload of spice is to be found in the southern reaches, but I suspect it was an imaginative invention made solely for purposes of a song. Some daring spice hunters do, on occasion, penetrate into the edge of the central belt, but that's extremely dangerous. Navigation is uncertain. Storms are frequent. So I think it's kind of interesting why Kynes starts this off. Kind of this, it is said, that there is a great motherload of spice. That's kind of how a good story should begin, how to intrigue people almost in a way. And you get also the idea that certain stories about the deep desert are used to put people off. But why bother tell a story that's mysterious and intriguing if you don't want anyone to know anything about it, I suppose? So he puts this down as a sort of a imaginative invention for a song. As I said, we're told some of the spice hunters work around the edge of the central belt, but it's extremely dangerous. Navigation is uncertain, storms are frequent, and that casualties increase the further you get away from the shield wall bases. It hasn't been profitable to venture too far south. That's more likely to put people off than anything, isn't it? And perhaps if we had a weather satellite, this question about weather satellites, there's going to be I think we'll have a bit of insider knowledge on that later on. Butte said that Butte speaks up at this point, the water seller, and says that the Fremen travel there. They can go anywhere, and that they've hunted out soaks and sipwells in the southern latitude. And these terms don't mean anything to Jessica. She wonders what they are. And Kynes' response here is far too quick. And this is what really gives him away, isn't it? Wild rumors. They're things that exist on other planets, but not Arrakis. So he explains what they are, being an ecologist. He tells us that a soak is a place where water seeps to the surface or near enough to be found by digging by certain signs, and that a sipwell is a form of soak where a person can draw water through a straw. And then here we go. This is the, or just I find this to read this correctly. So it is said, and there we go. That's the that he's given himself away in a number of ways. One, by talking too quickly, too hurriedly to try and hush this up. The other, so it's said. It's one of those. There are those who say this kind of thing, and often is it said? Really, who said it? That kind of thing. It's an attempt to cover up a certain piece of knowledge, or I suppose even sometimes where people retell stories that they don't actually have any credibility for. I heard this, or it is said by the people who live on the other side of the world, this kind of thing. It has a sort of meaning, if you like. And again, back to what we were talking about, certain words have a cue. And we're told here, Kynes has given himself away to Jessica and Paul. Only enough to pick up two different things. Jessica senses the deception in his words, but Paul wants to know just why is he lying. How very interesting. It is said, Jessica, the speech mannerism here reveals much about dependence on superstition. And this is kind of what I was sort of saying about Kynes, is that I think he's introduced as, I'm a scientist, I don't believe in superstition. I understand superstition and myth and stories to be, obvious in a cultural blah, 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 this kind of thing, but I don't buy it. And everything about him otherwise says the opposite. He's constantly quoting myth and religion, and could they be the one? Is this, and he's lining up people with prophecy, isn't he? From pretty much from the very beginning that we meet him. And we get this response from Paul. Paul says, I heard you have a saying, polish comes from the cities, wisdom from the desert. Kynes' response is again, not so. There are many sayings on our ranks. Doesn't want to give anything away. At this point, a note arrives, and we're told that Duke Leto sends his assurances. Dear, oh dear. We're informed that, now this is quite interesting, a lot of these pieces, separate pieces that we've seen within, I'll get to that in a second. My version of Dune says the Duke has sworn Canley. Hang on. I've got sewn 128. Let me just double check. The Duke has sewn Canley. I've got another one. Hang on. Let's just double check. I wonder what it is in this. Either I suppose, but it's sworn is the one that makes sense to me. Where are we? 154. Oh, very different book. Let's see. Oh, there's Duncan getting drunk. Let's see. That's a curious question, isn't it? I know there are a couple. There's a couple of things about misprints. The Duke has sworn Canley. Where are we on to it? Oh dear, dear. Bear with me a wee second, folks. Life of me, I can't even find it. Hang on. Let's see. Fair prevalence. Here we go. Let me see. Sworn Canley here too. Yeah, I have to say, the edition. Thank you for that. Mine says sworn as well, chat. Yeah, my greatest sci-fi or greatest one of all time has sworn as well. So another. Do you know something? This is the 50th anniversary edition book, yet it's been brought out again. It's got a sticker on it for the major motion picture. Hmm. So you can work out the kind of dates. This book, I think there's lots of misprints in it. It's not the first ones I've encountered. And for a book that's been in reprint for so many times, um, they really could sort it out. I think I have to say I'm not too impressed with this copy, and I think I was saying to you guys, I would be wondering if the book will survive me reading it and annotating it. And at this point, I'd if I was taking a pull on it, I'd say no. I'd be interested to see how much this book falls apart. Thank you very much for that, guys. Yeah, sworn. Let me just. That's a misprint. Let's take sewn out. Very good. Thank you very much. Let's see. Where do we get to? Sworn Canley. Oh yes, that's us. Right. The deep. Hang on. The note. That's us. Right. Sorry. The matter is settled, and we've been told that the carryall has been found. So again, this linking back to elements to do with Turek. Why Turek is there? Jessica reaching out to the smugglers. The whole idea of cutting down on graft and security, and that things would be enforced at the smugglers' end as well. All of that comes to a head with this note, really. We've been told that the carry-all has been found. A Harkonnen agent overcame the crew and flew the carry-all to a smuggler's base. Of course, Turek's here at the dinner party, hoping to sell the carry-all. Man and Machine turned over to our forces. Jessica gives a wee nod to Turek. He gives a nod back. There's the deal, and that probably gets everybody else in the room going, So it seems that the Atreides and the smugglers have an alliance. Jessica folds the note, puts it back in her sleeve. Glad there's no battle, says the banker. People here hope for peace and prosperity. Be it the water cellar, especially prosperity. Probably doesn't really bother about the peace. And of course, we get this rather I think it's funny. Jessica goes, dessert now? It's time for dessert. I just thought this was funny. The chef has prepared a Caladan sweet pongy rice in a sauce dulce. And I've just made a wee note that I thought it was quite funny. And I've written it reminds me on Carry On Up the Khyber. If anybody's not ever seen it, the old Carry On films. I don't know if they might not be too well known outside of Britain, but it's one of those the British Empire having dinner, if you know what I mean, while fully under attack from the natives and just continuing to serve pudding, this kind of thing. I just thought just that little pudding, reminds me of it. How did the Harkonnens get an agent into the Guild Bank? You think their prescience would preclude such spies, and that the Baron would boast about it? I don't know. I don't think the Baron's that boastful. That's the one thing I think. I think he's quite good at keeping stum, isn't he? But yeah. I think it's limited prescience, etc. I suppose maybe. But I suppose it's a good question. Possibly, maybe the whole act of being a spy has probably super evolved as well. But at the same time, maybe it's maybe little people that go unnoticed, I suppose, compared to dukes and swords masters and this kind of thing. And troubadours, what is a banker? Yeah, there's quite a lot of wee things that we're not too sure how they happen, I suppose. But there we go. Just a wee bit of a reminder for me. It just made me think on Carry On Up the Khyber, which is I love that. It's one of my favorite Carry On films. It's so stupid. It's wonderfully funny. Very true and sad in some ways as well. But there you go. The pongy rice and sauce dulce. We get the still suit manufacturer again, and we talked about his pattern before. Oh, that sounds wonderful. You must give me the recipe. He does it again. Sounds recipe. Can I have the recipe? There's the pattern. He's asked for it before. I was actually before we got to this bit, I wonder is recipe a code word? And of course, Jessica's response is kind of sensuous, isn't it? Rather seductive. Any recipe you desire. And at this point, she has the register of the man. I must let Howard know that this fearful little climber can be bought. So that's again Jessica at work for the Atreides, doing a bit of politicking, a bit of intriguing, playing the people in the right way. We have all of the small talk resuming. And Jessica, at this point, Jessica stares at her plate in the same way that Paul did earlier. And we're told that there's a coded part of Leto's message. So this bit's kind of interesting, just as we head to the end of the chapter here. The Harkonnens, we're told, have tried to get a shipment of lasguns. That they've Leto's note says that we've captured them, but that they may have gotten other shipments. And it seems that we can't place much store in shields, or that they don't place much store in shields. And I've written why. And that therefore they should take appropriate precautions. So simply the fact that the Harkonnens, lots of them trying to get lasguns, either means that if they're going to shoot at shields, they're, both the person who's attacked and the firer were going to get killed. So that Jessica the lasguns focuses on this. Lasguns can cut through any substance that's not shielded. The feedback from the shield, we're told, explodes both lasgun and user and the shield. Will kill the target and the gunner. And so there's a tactical problem. And often, I suppose, that the nature of tactics within the nature of the military, and particularly technology in the Dune universe, is that they're kind of offset things. Things offset each other. And because of the lasgun shield conundrum, that's why everybody runs around with knives and swords, basically. It creates a regression to earlier technologies. At this point, the unknowns fill her with uneasiness. At this point, I suppose Paul interjects here in a wee bit. Paul never doubted it, that they would find this carryall, that his father would find it, a fact that the Harkonnens will discover, no problem that Leto will not solve, basically. Whatever the problem is, Leto will solve it. And Jessica doesn't like this. Jessica's thoughts here, I've just put a wee note here, pragmatism, but he's boasting. He shouldn't boast, is what she says. No one who sleeps underground tonight as a precaution against lasguns has a right to boast about it. And I just put, that's the Bene Gesserit pragmatism that I particularly like. And that is the end of the banquet scene. And my goodness. Excuse me. Would you give me 1 wee second, folks? And I'm going to run to the loo very quickly. But if you've got any wee comments or questions for me on the banquet scene, let me know and I'll be right back. There we go. There we go. Sorry about that, folks. Right at the very end, we're coming up to 3 hours there. But yeah, if anybody does have any wee questions there at the end of the banquet scene, fire away. It's getting a bit nippy here, actually. But goodness, that's two really big chapters that we're through there. As I said, a very important chapter, and only really been filmed once, actually, with the TV miniseries, Frank Herbert's Dune. I thought, actually, the TV series, although it substitutes in the character of Irulan, I think it did the banquet scene exceptionally well. And I think it's a really, really important scene. And more importantly, I suppose, who it's probably most important to is Frank Herbert, I think. A lot of his ideas, a lot of what he wants to educate in as subtle a way as possible. He doesn't want to ram it down our throats. There's an awful lot here in this chapter. We've got spice mining, the nature of water and nature of ecology, Liebig's law of the minimum. We've hydraulic despotism. We have intrigue, the potential of violence all the way through this, an awful lot of tension, some humor, and a real, as I said, that's who's coming to dinner. We get to meet a range of the power players that are on the planet, as opposed to the in the universe. Um, and just to see how the three members of the Atreides family kind of really deal with them, how Paul deals with them, how Leto deals with them, how Jessica deals with them, and particularly within this chapter, I think each one of them is slightly flawed here, there, here or there. I think Leto makes a lot of mistakes, and there's that point in it where I think he realizes he's missed something. That and that it's a thing that others don't miss. There's just something a bit sad and pathetic about him, and you feel that Leto really does need to be a kind of man of action. I think in the previous chapter, how the whole flying of the ornithopter, dealing with the situation in the here and now, the worms and evacuating everybody, that seemed to be really him in his element, if you see what I mean. But there's different aspects of his character here that aren't great. We see him with the serving woman, and his anger is ever present. He's an annoying, angry man. I think I certainly wouldn't want to be around him for any particular length of time. And yeah, a little bit more criminal behavior, as I said. There's all sorts of things here, barking at people, and his anger and his childishness, I think, really in close comparison to Paul's, cool behavior, maturity, this kind of thing. Paul's a little bit, at the end of it, and gives himself away a wee bit. He's a bit boastful, isn't he? Sorry. Yeah, boasting. He shouldn't boast, but he's a young man, and this is another test for Paul as well. It's a political test. It's a test of being a host, if you like. There are rules for being a host, I suppose. I would think. My actual surname means host, but in the different sense of the word, it isn't a large body of angry warriors, that kind of thing. But hospitality and laws of hospitality, I suppose, culturally are very important. And as even Jessica points out, there's no greater sort of way to sort of do the social mom and dad thing than to have them all round for dinner, if you think, There you go. Chaya says, one of my favourite scenes, love how Herbert shuffles you effortlessly inside and among each character's headspace, perspective and realizations. It is one of the things we're constantly bouncing through different points of view, and how we move around them. You're absolutely right. It's quite effortless, isn't it? And little bits of conversation that we bring back to it. It's a I mean, this idea that Dune is what is it they call it, the psychotic family novel, this kind of thing. Well, here's the psychotic family dinner to go with it, and I think it's an enormously fun scene. It's got something Shakespearean, something Machiavellian, and in terms of what you want from a science fiction book, if those old boring tropes of science fiction, we've got a laser gun there, a couple of things mentioned, but there's no laser beams and rocket ships and all of that. It's a wonderful scene of political interaction, tension, and I said it is funny in places, and there is so much there. But the way that as I keep saying, that Herbert likes to teach his ecological lessons, and is trying to do that, trying to imprint certain ideas upon us. But the way he does them, he doesn't throw everything at you. He can drop an idea here, build it up a little bit the next chapter, that kind of thing. And I just, the sense of the whole epigraph running with this idea of the sardonic. I think the two important things in this chapter are that sense of greatness, the sense of sardonic, looking at Leto, and then the Bene Gesserit lesson that tells us that we should identify motivation first and have a look at that. So we see the motives of not everyone, but in particular, there's a couple of people coming out. Probably power and prosperity, money, etc., is what motivates a lot of people. And we even do get to see, I suppose, the influence of a great house upon a poor serving woman. The poor there, I suppose. So these are the people that kind of run Arakin society. and they don't appear to be all nice. And it seems that most of the women were pointed out are I don't know what's the word. They're like sophisticated companions there to say the right thing, to make prompts, and are probably agents of some kind in themselves. Thanks, by the way, for sorting out that laving. I really do. The number of I think I said I had Sir Peter de Vried, Vried, the other week, but I think it's quite appalling to find this number of mistakes in a book that's been continually published since 1965. I suppose it's an easy one just to slap a new cover on it and throw it out there, isn't it? Without doing too much about it. And one of the biggest crimes I think that's ever been done to that's not a crime, I suppose, but something that could easily have been done to the Dune novels, all of them, is and the terminologies of the Imperium. There's different words introduced in different books. It would have been nice if somebody had kind of worked towards putting in terminologies of the Imperium, perhaps for all of the books. But yeah, well, this one's holding together not too bad, I have to say. It's only when you it's only when you do that. But the writing, I suppose, what is it? The spacing on the book itself, it's had to be bent open. I was having a bit of bother reading words that ran into from the right hand side on the left hand page, if you see what I mean. Excuse me, which was a bit annoying. But there we go. Yes, indeed. It does seem quite effortless. It's a wonderfully written piece of intrigue, politics, humor. All of it's there, and we learn so much. And we're even getting, as I think, as we're getting maybe Duncan starting to have a bit maybe of the spice beer, possibly a bit of setup, which I think is that coming in the next chapter, isn't it? There is no escape. We pay for the violence of our ancestors, which we'll have a look on Sunday. Hopefully, that's not going to be too long. It's not short. It's not short, but it's not enormous. But yeah, there we go. I'm really pleased to get that one done because, I said, just working away, folks, and particularly doing the Tiger video, which it's taken a wee while to get put together because of doing the Dune book club, I suppose. But I said I'm not. It's midnight, and I've got to keep working on it, so I'll not probably have it up by Friday at 9 because it takes a few hours to be rendered and then it takes a few hours to go up on YouTube. But hopefully we'll have it for you by Saturday evening, folks, and then we'll have the book club on Sunday as well. So there we go. Listen, it's been great as always. It's one of my favorite scenes as well, Chaya, and yeah, it's actually one of my favorite scenes in any book, and it kind of reminds me of other things as well. A bit like it reminds me a little bit of the scene of the banquet scene in Macbeth as well, for example. But it's it's a great interaction, and it really does well to introduce certain characters, certain ideas, and really get a sense of ecology and possibly what it would need to terraform a planet, because that's essentially what they're talking about, isn't it? So thank you guys, thanks Cynthia, thanks Chaya, thanks everybody for joining me. As always, it's been great fun. I know these big chapters are a bit scary because I know we've been at it for 3 hours, and I think, will it take that long to do? And I just don't, not scary to me in that sense. I just don't want to rush through them and miss little details, and particularly when the chapters are longer, I think there's less important things in them. If you like, the action tends to overtake certain things in terms of ideas. But definitely 2 big chapters in a row. Very fun. Looking forward to the next one, folks. So hopefully we'll see you on Sunday at 9 o'clock GMT. And if you've got the wee like and subscribe thing, hit the wee bell, whatever it is that YouTube does. Keep a wee eye out for my video on Alfred Bester's Tiger, which should be coming before Sunday anyway. That much is true, and it'll be a half an hour video, and it'll be hopefully spoiler free for those who want to check out Tiger, which I think is a massive influence on Dune and a lot of other things besides. But there we go. Thanks as always, folks. It's been a pleasure, and thank you for your comments and suggestions and ideas. It's always a great help. So I'll say all the very best to you, and I'm knackered, and I'm going to say good night, and we'll see you next time. Thanks very much, everyone. Good night. Take care of yourselves no matter where you are. Bye-bye.